TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. The U.S. defeating Iran changes everything. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, revolution is a way of life, and revolution is for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I got some revolutionary breakfast or lunch, whatever time zone you in and however you getting up. Let's get right into the content. Salute.
It is becoming clearer to people around the world that the United States has been losing the war against Iran, which the U.S. itself started. And this is being discussed not only in foreign countries, but also in Washington, D.C. Today, I'm going to be explaining how neoconservative war hawks in Washington, who were architects of the Iraq War and the wars on Libya and Syria, and who for years advocated for war on Iran, have now reluctantly admitted that the U.S. is losing this war, and it's going to have massive geopolitical repercussions on the entire world, leading to the weakening of the U.S. empire, and not only the strengthening of Iran, but also other countries, including China, Russia, and the global South as a whole. Now, independent anti-war voices like us have already been saying this, but what's incredible is it's now being acknowledged even by warmongers in Washington, D.C., again, who are some of the architects of the Iraq War, like this man I'm showing an image of right now. I'll be discussing who exactly he is and what he's saying in a minute or two here. But a brief summary of his argument is that the U.S. is losing this war against Iran, and this loss is going to have an even bigger geopolitical impact than the U.S. loss in the wars against Vietnam and Afghanistan. And this will transform global geopolitics and will strengthen the position of China and Russia and the global South more broadly. And the role of the U.S. will be weakened around the world. So in a moment here, I'm going to go into further detail and explain who the author of the article was. But first, I want to answer the question, why are pro-war neoconservative hawks in Washington admitting this fact? And I think it's quite clear. It's because they can see the writing on the wall. They can see that Trump is extremely unpopular, especially because of this war, but also because of inflation and the cost of living crisis and corruption. But this war has really hurt Trump's popularity even more. And polls show that the vast majority of Americans, at least 60%, and some polls show an even higher percentage of Americans, oppose this war. So now I want to spend a moment briefly explaining the context and how the discourse surrounding the Iran war has evolved.
Howdy, y'all. If y'all live in Texas and have 0 DUIs in the last 5 years, listen up. I've spent the last 30 years as a financial advisor helping everyday
in the past few weeks. Now, the U.S. and Israel launched this war of aggression on the 28th of February, and a month later, the British newspaper The Independent acknowledged that Iran was the clear winner, as Trump's desperate bid to end the war shows that he's desperately looking for an off-ramp. This was the foreign media. European media outlets started to acknowledge after a month that the U.S. was losing. Then in mid-April, some U.S. corporate media outlets started to acknowledge that the war was not going well. The Wall Street Journal published an op-ed titled, "For now at least, the Iran war seems to be failing." And this was written by the former editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal, who was previously a major supporter of Donald Trump, although he later turned against Trump. Meanwhile, U.S. intelligence agencies have been feeding information to U.S. media outlets, acknowledging that the war has been going very badly. The New York Times reported this May that U.S. intelligence shows that Iran still has the vast majority of its missile capabilities. Iran has operational access to 30 of its 33 missile sites along the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is the narrow strait off the coast of Iran, and it's the world's most important oil transit choke point. Before this war, about 20% of the globally traded oil supply passed through this narrow strait on a daily basis. Iran had initially closed down access to the Strait of Hormuz in response to the US-Israeli war of aggression, although Iran has allowed ships from China and Russia and India and countries that it considers to be friendly countries, their ships are allowed to pass through the strait. This angered Washington, so Trump declared a U.S. naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. However, U.S. intelligence officials also admitted in an article published by the Washington Post that Iran will be able to withstand this U.S. military blockade of the Strait of Hormuz for many months. Iran actually has leverage. Iran has an advantage here, whereas the U.S. is the country that is not able to maintain this blockade for so long, especially when you consider the fact that Trump's war of aggression has caused the largest oil crisis in history, and this is causing a global economic crisis and a food crisis because many farmers cannot get access to the fertilizers they need to grow food. And then finally, U.S. intelligence officials admitted to the media that Iran has succeeded in defending itself and destroying or heavily damaging the majority of U.S. military bases in the region, in West Asia, also known as the Middle East. Trump, of course, denied this, but the fact that U.S. intelligence officials are leaking so much to the media is a reflection of the fact that this war is obviously going extremely badly. And Trump and his top cabinet members will go out and claim that they're winning the war. But all of these leaks from these U.S. intelligence officials clearly demonstrate that the exact opposite is happening. So now, with all of that context established, I want to discuss the main point of this analysis today, which is that even some neoconservative war hawks in the U.S., who were architects of the Iraq War, who have supported every U.S. war for decades, even they are now getting cold feet, and they are lamenting that Washington is losing this war, Tehran is winning, and it will change the world. This was admitted in The Atlantic magazine, which is a neoconservative publication. It supports Atlanticism, the idea that the West should be this unified imperialist bloc of Europe and the US, unified by the military alliance NATO that ensures US imperial dominance of the entire world. The Atlantic represents neoliberal free market economics. It represents the interests of large corporations, US corporations. It represents the interests of the military industrial complex and US dominated organizations like NATO and the IMF and the World Bank. That's the ideology of The Atlantic magazine. And yet, The Atlantic published a surprising article titled "Checkmate in Iran," and it's subtitled, "Washington Cannot Reverse or Control the Consequences of Losing This War." And the author of this shockingly honest article is none other than Robert Kagan. He is one of the most influential foreign policy thinkers in the US. He is a notorious neoconservative war hawk who was one of the original advocates for the US invasion of Iraq in 2003. Now, Robert Kagan was one of the co-founders of one of the most influential think tanks in Washington called the Project for the New American Century, or PNAC. That is PNAC, PNAC. Members of PNAC included top officials in the George W. Bush administration, like Dick Cheney, who was Bush's vice president, and Paul Wolfowitz, who was Deputy Secretary of Defense under Bush and the president of the World Bank, along with neocons like John Bolton, who was actually brought back by Donald Trump in his first administration to be National Security Advisor. If you look at a list of the founding signatories of the Project for the New American Century, you can see it included nearly a dozen top members of the George W. Bush administration, and some of them later went on to join the Trump administration and became Trump supporters, like Elliott Abrams and Frank Gaffney. Also, Jeb Bush, the Florida politician from the Bush family who ran for president, he was one of the original PNAC signatories. And Francis Fukuyama, who wrote the infamous book, The End of History and the Last Man, after the overthrow of the Soviet Union in 1991, in which he argued that US-style capitalist liberal democracy would be the final stage of human evolution, and every country would eventually adopt this kind of US neoliberal capitalist system. So the point is that these neoconservatives, or neocons, were extremely influential in the 1990s and 2000s. Again, they filled top positions in the US government under George W. Bush. And many people argued that Dick Cheney, who was vice president under Bush Jr., was essentially the shadow president. Bush was more of a figurehead, and Cheney was working behind the scenes to make many of the decisions, including the invasion of Iraq. And by the way, it's not a coincidence that Dick Cheney had previously been the CEO of the oil corporation Halliburton, which made a killing off of the war in Iraq. It reaped in billions and billions of dollars in profits. But it's important to understand what exactly neoconservatism is. The way that they portray it is that the US should be the global policeman, and the US should protect so-called freedom and democracy all around the world and spread liberal democracy by carrying out regime change and carrying out wars to overthrow illiberal regimes. That's the nice-sounding propaganda narrative. In reality, the neocons are blatant imperialists and neocolonialists who are proud of the fact that the US runs a global empire. They think that's a good thing, and that the US should not actually be the policeman of the world, because then the US would have to consistently follow the law, although there are many corrupt police officers. But in reality, they think that the US should be the global emperor, the global dictator that should overthrow any government it doesn't like. Their narrative is that this is about freedom and democracy. What they won't admit is this is actually about the interests of large corporations. And all of these neocons have been funded by big billionaire capitalist oligarchs, and their think tanks in Washington are funded by the military-industrial complex. They are gangsters of capital. They represent the interests of large capitalists, big billionaire oligarchs, and massive monopolistic US corporations that use the US military and try to overthrow any independent government that challenges the global dictatorship of US imperialism. That is what neoconservatism actually represents. However, the neoconservative movement began to split in 2016 when Donald Trump was the Republican Party's presidential candidate, because the original neocons were all Republicans. They were all Reagan Republicans. They adored Ronald Reagan, and their founding statement of principles repeatedly mentioned Reagan. However, in the 2016 election, the neocons in the Project for the New American Century split. About half of them became Trump supporters, and the other half supported Hillary Clinton, who was the right-wing candidate of the Democratic Party for the 2016 presidential election. Of course, she lost that election, but neocons like Robert Kagan loved Hillary Clinton because even though she was a Democrat, she's always been a right-wing pro-war Democrat. She supported the invasion of Iraq. She oversaw the war on Libya in 2011 in the Obama administration when Clinton was Secretary of State. She oversaw the war on Syria. So in 2016, some neocons left the Republican Party, like Robert Kagan, who was a lifelong Republican. He became an independent. He didn't join the Democrats, but he did publicly support Hillary Clinton. And another influential neocon who started to work with the Democrats was Robert Kagan's wife, Victoria Nuland. Nuland served as the U.S. ambassador to NATO in the George W. Bush administration. Like her husband, she strongly supported the illegal U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. But then later, Nuland joined the Obama administration. She worked in the State Department of Hillary Clinton because Nuland had been a longtime friend of Hillary Clinton. So Clinton brought her into Obama's State Department. And Nuland was also a close friend of Antony Blinken, who was the neoconservative Secretary of State under President Joe Biden. So Blinken also brought Nuland in to Biden's State Department. So the Obama and Biden State Departments were run by these warmongering neoconservatives. So there are neocons in both the Republican and Democratic parties. And Victoria Nuland in particular is especially infamous because of her role in starting the war in Ukraine. So back in 2014, when there was a coup in Ukraine that overthrew Ukraine's democratically elected government that had been geopolitically neutral, that was not pro-NATO and did not want Ukraine to join NATO. When these protests were going on in Ukraine in 2014, the US government was openly supporting them, and Victoria Nuland was then serving as the Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. And she actually traveled to Ukraine, and there's a famous photo of her handing out cookies to the protesters who eventually overthrew the Ukrainian government. And right next to her in the photo was Jeffrey Piat, who was the US ambassador to Ukraine, who again was going to these protests, openly supporting these protests. The US ambassador was blatantly meddling in Ukraine's internal affairs to overthrow the government. In fact, just a few weeks before the Ukrainian government was overthrown and a pro-US, pro-NATO billionaire oligarch was put in power named Petro Poroshenko, a few weeks before that coup, there was a leaked phone call in which Victoria Nuland was discussing with the US ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piat, who the new leaders of the Ukrainian government would be after the coup. Listen to this leaked phone recording in which this top US State Department official and the US ambassador are deciding who would be good candidates to run the new regime in Kiev. I mean, this rhetoric is like neo-colonial. Washington is literally deciding who the leaders of a foreign country should be.
The world of education has changed in how knowledge is delivered and received. At Houston Christian University, we offer the latest online.
What do you think?
I think we're in play.
Good. So I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea. I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, you know, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay, good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
So again, those words you were hearing there were from Victoria Nuland, a top U.S. State Department official who worked in the Bush Jr., Obama, and Biden administrations. And she is the wife of the notorious neoconservative ideologue, Robert Kagan. So now that I have clearly established who exactly Kagan is, you can understand how important his article in The Atlantic magazine is. This article is titled Checkmate in Iran. This is not an anti-war activist writing this. This is one of the most pro-war voices in U.S. politics. Kagan has advocated for war on Iran for decades. He was one of the architects of the Iraq War. The reason I spent so much time explaining his background is because you now understand the significance of the following remarks that he made in this article. And you can understand that it's not just coming from the mouth of anti-war independent journalists like me. This is what he wrote. I'm going to read a big part of it, but I think it's very important analysis. He said, quote, "Defeat in the present confrontation with Iran will be of an entirely different character. It can neither be repaired nor ignored. There will be no return to the status quo ante. With control of the strait, Iran merges as the key player in the region and one of the key players in the world. The roles of China and Russia as Iran's allies are strengthened. The role of the United States substantially diminished. The conflict has revealed an America that is unreliable and incapable of finishing what it started." End quote. That paragraph confirms exactly what we here at Geopolitical Economy Report have been saying for months now, that the U.S. empire, by overextending itself, by being so extremely aggressive, is actually accelerating its own decline and accelerating the transition toward a more multipolar global order in which China and Russia and some other global South countries are more influential. Robert Kagan acknowledged that the US and Israel pounded Iran for 37 days, killing much of the Iranian government's leadership, yet they could not collapse the Iranian government or even exact a small concession from Tehran. Kagan also acknowledged that Iran has significant leverage in this war, not only because it now effectively controls the Strait of Hormuz, which is the world's most important oil transit choke point, but also because of the Persian Gulf monarchies that have been loyal U.S. allies. He wrote that, quote, More military action will inevitably lead Iran to retaliate against neighboring Gulf states. Trump halted attacks on Iran not because he was bored, but because Iran was striking the region's vital oil and gas facilities, end quote.
You look great. What is your secret? I got my kids Aceable driver's ed.
Well, the secret's out. Aceable is online driver's ed that's actually built for the way teens learn. So while they're swiping and scrolling through driver's ed, you're finally off duty.
See you, Mom.
Drive safe.
Girl, you look great. Thanks to Aceable.
Tap into driver's ed at aceable.com.
Kagan also acknowledged that just a few strikes by Iran could devastate the Persian Gulf's oil and gas infrastructure for years, if not decades. Decades. He said this could cause a prolonged economic crisis and a global catastrophe. And then he wrote, quote, "If this isn't checkmate, it's close," end quote. Kagan then concluded the article arguing that the only way for the U.S. to win this war would be to militarily occupy Iran, to launch a massive ground invasion, to occupy the country and try to set up a puppet regime like the U.S. did in Iraq, although ultimately the U.S. failed in Iraq and Iran is a significantly larger country. So Kagan wrote that, quote, "Walking away now could seem like the least bad option. Defeat for the United States, therefore, is not only possible, but likely," end quote. Again, that is an incredible admission by one of the most notorious war hawks in Washington. And this neocon, this arch neocon, Robert Kagan, is essentially admitting that independent anti-war journalists like us and our friends and colleagues, that we were right when we were saying that the U.S. is losing this war and the victory of Iran in this war will transform global politics. It will not just impact West Asia and the Persian Gulf, but the entire world. This is a geopolitical earthquake. And I think many neocons in the US can now see the writing on the wall. And this is why it's not just Kagan, but several other prominent neoconservative voices who have also come out against the war on Iran, although they advocated a war on Iran for many decades. Another example is William Kristol, or Bill Kristol, who is one of the co-founders of the Project for the New American Century alongside Robert Kagan. And Kristol was a big Reagan Republican and a Bush Republican. He strongly supported the war in Iraq. But he and many of these other neocons are now jumping off the sinking ship. They can see that Trump and the Republican Party are extremely unpopular, and this war is blowing back hard. And this is why Bill Kristol supported Hillary Clinton, and he even started supporting some neoconservative Democrats, not just Clinton. And this is why Kristol actually created a new media outlet called The Bulwark, which is a neoconservative, pro-war, pro-imperialist publication, but it's run by never Trump Republicans, as they call themselves. You know, they are still conservatives, but they hate Donald Trump so much that they're willing to ally with some Democrats, right-wing Democrats, against Trump. And it's not because these neocons suddenly had a change of heart and they're now suddenly against war and against imperialism and they support peace. No, it's because they're opportunists. They are supreme opportunists. They are political shapeshifters, and they always look to see which direction the wind is blowing. And they can clearly see that Trump is very unpopular. Trump's approval rating has been absolutely sinking lower and lower, especially when it comes to war. 60% of Americans oppose Trump's war on Iran, according to a poll published in May by NPR, PBS News, and Marist Poll. 60% of Americans oppose the war. Only 33%, one-third of Americans, support this war. Moreover, the British polling agency YouGov published a survey this May that found that the majority of Americans say the U.S. is not winning the war against Iran. Only 13% of Americans think the U.S. is winning the war. 39% say no, and the U.S. will not win the war. That's the plurality of Americans. 22% said no, but the U.S. will win the war, which I think is very unlikely. But when you combine the people who say yes and no, but the US will win, together that's only 35% of Americans, whereas 39%, the plurality, say no and the US will not win. And then the other 26%, 1/4, said they do not know if the US will win. So all of this is part of a growing mountain of evidence demonstrating that the US empire is seriously in a quagmire here. Trump has caused a crisis. He has started a war that he simply cannot win. Iran has been winning, and this is going to have cascading geopolitical consequences for years to come, and not just on the US, not just on West Asia, but on the entire world. If you want to learn more about this conflict and other important geopolitical issues, make sure you subscribe to our work here at Geopolitical Economy Report. I'm the editor-in-chief, Ben Norton. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. Again, please like and subscribe. Please share this.
Wilkerson and Larry Johnson are here with us. Welcome back.
It's Larry Friday.
Yeah.
Larry
to
squared.
the power of 2.
Yeah. Actually, it's the power of 40 or 50 because of us. Yeah, we.
Yeah. Let me just ruin your happiness with Donald Trump.
Well, that's a good start. I was just looking while I was in the webinar. I said he's going to play that. He's going to play that because it was all over YouTube.
Yeah, right now what we've learned from Iran, it seems that 2 teams right now are in Iran. One of them, a Pakistani team, they went there together with the other team is from Qatar. Both of them are trying to talk with Iranians. I don't know what do they have as their agenda in these sort of talks. It seems to me that Qatari's part is somehow representing the Arab states, GCC countries, and the Pakistani part is representing the United States. But somehow the main issues right now is still the same, the Strait of Hormuz and the Iranian nuclear program. And what would be the outcome in terms of how long does it take to negotiate on the nuclear program of Iran and that enriched uranium that still is in Iran. And we learned yesterday, the Iranian supreme leader said there is no way that this enriched uranium going to get outside of Iran. And here is what Donald Trump said yesterday.
Control of the Strait of Hormuz, as you know, with our blockade. The blockade's been 100% effective. Nobody's been able to get through. It's like a steel wall. It's our Navy. We have the greatest military anywhere in the world. We wiped out their Navy. We not wiped out their air. I think they're down to about, I would say we knocked out 85% of their missile capacity. It's very hard for them now to build missiles, to build drones. We have great drone technology, anti-drone technology now that, frankly, we didn't have even 2 months ago. We have unbelievable drone technology, both for making them and also for knocking them down. But look, we're going to either make sure they don't have a nuclear weapon, or we're going to have to do something very drastic. And the people of the country, I believe when it's put to the people of our country, they will all agree that we cannot let Iran have a nuclear.
Yeah. Larry, go ahead. Go ahead, Carl.
Who's the pregnant gentleman to his left?
Yeah. Yeah, he ate a basketball.
Yeah.
Larry, go ahead. Your understanding of what's going on.
Again, the whole nuclear issue is just an excuse. It's not the real issue, because the United States' desire to destroy and eliminate the Islamic Republic predated any active nuclear program on the part of Iran. So there are talks underway. As you noted before we came on there, there's Qataris are reportedly in town, but the more important one is Pakistan. So Pakistan's got the full backing of China. and they are, what I'm told by I've got one source with access into the Pakistani delegation, and they're saying, hey, there's an agreement that's close. Now, I went back to my source and said, I don't see it. How's that possible? Because Iran's demand is, you lift all the sanctions and you return the frozen assets, and we're going to continue to run the Strait of Hormuz. Forget about the nuclear stuff. Those are Iran's core demands right now. And I don't see Donald Trump willing to accept that. I mean, it'd be great if he did. The world would be better off, and we'd be on the road to recovery. But I don't see him doing that. Now, that said, Trump once again is lying. According to the IRGC, in the past 24 hours, and this was as of about an hour ago, 35 vessels, including tankers, container ships, and other commercial vessels, have passed through the Strait of Hormuz under the coordination of the IRGC with a security escort. So it's not business as usual, but it sure looks like the Strait of Hormuz is starting to operate under the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, the PGSA, that Iran has put into place.
Yeah. Carl, jump in, and your understanding of that.
I agree with what Larry said, and let me heighten the remark he made, or you made, or both of you made, that anything Pakistan is doing is very much in coordination with China. Guarantee you that. So we're looking at possibly two parties providing good offices. One of them, the most powerful state in the world now. I keep saying that, they are. And the other, it's ally, if you will, while at the same time pretending still to be somewhat of an ally of the United States. So it puts them in a good office's position of some power. All that said, I can't make anything out of what's going between the two parties. I see Trump still being bound to a certain extent, Netanyahu, no matter what people are reporting about animosity between them or whatever. I see him bound in that embrace and unable to escape it. So I don't see any way he's going to get out of doing what is Bibi's wet dream, and that is to finish off Iran, to make it a Bantustan populated entity or whatever. And that's still the predominant factor here, I think, no matter how much Trump tries to obscure it and goes through these vacillations, which are ultimately going to lead to nothing but a resumption of hostilities, if I'm reading it right. And I'm reading the forced deployments and other things right, too. Looking more grim and more grim day by day, should we try to do something with military force, be it a limited action to secure the uranium, as it were, or be it a more broad action to finish off Iran, including massive air power, which is really the only thing we have in our arsenal. I don't know. I can't say anymore where this guy's going. I think he desperately wants out. That's the only reality I can detect. But he's also caught.
Yeah. And the other dimension here is the Hajj. So, and people I've been in contact with said it's just been in terms of the crisis action teams, the cats that are up operating to run the war, said that it's been real quiet. Well, why is it quiet? You got 2 to 3 million Muslims, Sunni and Shia, converging on Mecca, and the commemoration of the Hajj starts on Sunday, the 24th, and it extends for about really through the 31st. So for another 7 days. Eid, I guess, is like next Wednesday, next Thursday, one of those days. So this is a time of great importance within Islam, and Saudis have made it pretty clear to the United States that they're not going to allow Saudi Arabia to be used as a launching pad for any kind of U.S. military operations. In fact, I was told by someone who I think is in a position to know that the United States has moved all of its air refueling activities over to Iraq. They're not taking place over Saudi airspace. So if the Saudis persist, because it persists in preventing the United States from conducting air operations from Saudi Arabia, and then Trump's options militarily shrink dramatically. They're forced into a very narrow corridor then through Iraq, which actually will create some more vulnerabilities. And it's important for people to understand that the F-35s are not based in Saudi Arabia, is my understanding. They're based in Jordan at the Muwafaq al-Southi Air Base, or in Israel. So the distance from there to, say, Riyadh, because the Prince Saud Air Base is just outside of Riyadh, that's about 820 miles. And the distance, if they go to Kuwait, say Kuwait City, that's 720 miles. Well, those aircraft only have legs for 550 miles. So they're going to have to be, refueled even before they get to eastern Saudi Arabia or eastern Kuwait. And then they're limited about how much farther they can fly. They are certainly not, they don't have the legs to fly deep into Iran. So this whole and this makes the refueling mission critical, because these air refuelers are going to have, they're not dealing with just one plane, they're going to have to deal with dozens. So if Saudis, the Saudis pulled the plug on Project Freedom 3 weeks ago and told Trump, no, you're not going to use our territory for that to, quote, open the strait. And Trump had to, we're pausing Operation Freedom. No, they were pausing. They got the plug pulled. So it remains to be seen going forward now that if the Saudis, with the support of Qatar and Kuwait, tell the United States, you know what, it's been fun, nice knowing you, but we're gonna take the Russians and Chinese up on their offers of a security umbrella, because we're less likely to get blown up.
Yeah.
Now that I thought about it, stupid me, I hadn't thought about it, but the Pakistanis were very instrumental in imposing security in the past when the Saudis had a big problem at Mecca. That might explain more so than other matters why there are so many Pakistani forces in Saudi Arabia now. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't explain the fighters necessarily. But the Pacs have been very instrumental in helping the Saudis with problems. In that regard, I mean, not connected to the situation that we're looking at in the war, but connected to serenity in Mecca.
Carol, there is a report, by CNN and other outlets that say Iran is exceeding all timelines in reproducing those weapons they have used during the war, in 40 days of war. And Donald Trump, just the clip that I played for you, he says that we've destroyed everything.
Which is absolute hogwash. I mean, even the minor things he said about the Air Force and the Navy, it's hogwash. I mean, if you consider the ones that are destroyed and the ones they've actually destroyed in the Navy, for example, and then you consider the number that they have, because these are small boats, these aren't destroyers and cruisers, then his idea that he's wiped out the Iranian Navy is poppycock. But the idea that the Iranian Navy is powerful in a way that we would say a Navy was powerful is not a true description. It's a coastal Navy. It's a Navy that's able to, with missiles, medium-range missiles, do some damage perhaps, but it's not a formidable military force when put up against the United States' Navy and what it can do. So those are just preposterous, and he keeps repeating them. It's almost like he's got a spool in his brain and it just rolls out. Yeah. And every time it rolls out, it gets more and more ridiculous.
Yeah. because the concept of the Iranian Navy, Larry, I did my military service in the Navy in Iran. That's why. The whole concept is defensive. It's not offensive. Yep. That's why they're behaving this way. I don't see that much.
Ahmadinejad told me that in New York. Basically, a coastal defense navy with a little reach, given missiles, a little reach outside the coastal area, but basically a coastal defense navy.
I'll tell you offline my Navy joke. It's probably not appropriate for your show.
I think my Navy joke today would be Admiral Bradley Cooper testifying in the Congress.
Yeah, you see, that deer in the headlight look. God.
He proves what we used to say in Newport at the Naval War College, that surface warriors have no brains.
Yeah, no, that was pathetic, because he instead of answering the question, he went for obfuscation. And people don't know what I'm talking about. He was one of the congressmen who is a former, I think he was Army, was asking him about, please define the difference between obliteration and degradation. And he kept saying, well, I can't talk about the nuclear program. And the congressman said, I'm not asking about the nuclear program. Please explain to me in your use of English language the difference between obliterate and degrade.
Yeah.
Well, I can't talk about the nuclear program. And it's like, oh.
When you think of it, one of the guys just ripping him up was Seth Moulton from Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's who I was talking about.
Who's a Marine.
Oh, was he a Marine? Okay.
Yeah, he was a Harvard graduate at the time of 9/11, and he gained some notoriety, as well he probably should have. He left Harvard and enlisted in the Marine Corps because of 9/11.
Yeah.
Larry, the United States sent 2 destroyers with laser weapons, and they're talking about fighting drones in the region. And what would be the main objective, and how capable are these laser weapons, or these destroyers that are capable of using these laser new sort of weapons? And we haven't seen that much in this war so far.
They may be effective at taking out a single drone, but if you get a drone swarm, they're useless. And Iran uses drone swarms, multiple drones being fired at the same time. So this is, again, I was happy to see Admiral Cottle, I think is his name. Yeah. He was testifying before.
Daryl Cottle.
Yeah, Daryl Cottle. He confirmed everything I've been saying, that we don't have the military power to send. If we send any ships into the Strait of Hormuz, they're going to be destroyed, and they're not going to be destroyed by one single weapon or one single method, because Iran's got a whole number of instruments to draw upon. I'll call it its orchestra of mayhem. They have many submarines. They have underwater drones. They have surface drones. They have surface ships, the fast boats, the bog hammers, which are equipped with anti-ship missiles. They have coastal defense cruise missiles. They have short-range ballistic missiles, and they have aerial drones. So that's a whole lot of firepower that can be brought to bear on a destroyer or any other ship. And that's why I give the Admiral great credit, man. He understands, nope, we're not walking into that, because we'll get waxed.
Yeah. Colonel, here is what he said.
Court with that. We have looked into that. That's a very challenging mission in that narrow strait when it's contested. And so when you're in a contested environment, to demine the Strait of Hormuz or to do escort duty is not something that's easy to do. So we're going to have to get to a place that strait is open with a generally accepted ceasefire before that can be turned on en masse.
So are you saying you can't, it's not, in your opinion, you're not able to?
Yeah, keep on going. Keep on going. You're not able to do what Trump is saying you're doing already.
Yeah. So, Colonel, it means that there is no military solution to what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. And
Nima, that's been true since the war started.
Yeah.
Well, let's say it accurately. There's no military solution that we're willing to pay the cost. Yeah, there might be a military solution, but
nuclear weapons.
Yeah, it'd be a pyrrhic victory at best.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I hate to laugh at that because I'm hearing more and more talk about nuclear weapons. I'm hearing talk like, well, we spent all this time and money. How come we can't use them?
Yeah.
But Colonel, when it comes to Israel, we know that there is a report saying that Donald Trump and Netanyahu, they have their own differences when it comes to the continuation of the war. And Netanyahu really wants to continue this war. He's not fighting the war, by the way. The war is, he really wants the United States and Iran to continue the war because he has something else to do in Israel and with the case of Lebanon. And because Lebanon is getting something, they're having a lot of problems with Lebanon.
Just like before.
FPV drones, they're just hitting Iron Dome batteries. It's so difficult for Israel to replace these batteries in a long run if the time goes by and we see the same thing happening over and over. That's why he wants the United States in the region. That's why I would say they would put a lot of pressure on the Trump administration to stay there. Are you optimistic about this war, this conflict, ending anytime soon, or you see the continuation of this conflict in some way or another? I would say not an active war or something like the blockade that the United States tried to do with the ceasefire.
If you look at Lebanon and you look back to 1982 when Ariel Sharon was the Minister of Defense and more or less was the architect of that invasion, and you look at their ignominious, and I call it ignominious, and they made it even more ignominious by slaughtering people in the camps on their withdrawal, something they still won't talk about and deny. If you look at that and then look at, I think it was July 2006, and the lesson they got taught by Hezbollah at that time, and then you look at today, you understand how intractable the problem is that Netanyahu has created for himself in yet another theater of war. And he hasn't finished Gaza. There's no way he's finished Gaza. That's the biggest criticism that Naftali Bennett and others level at him, because he's got Hamas in the tunnels and he hasn't done anything. And he's so frustrated over that, and the IDF is so frustrated over that, that I saw yesterday, their total of killing people now still in Gaza during this ceasefire. I still wonder what ceasefire means in Hebrew. During this ceasefire, their total of killing people is really staggering when you look at it. And every day they engineer new ways to justify the killing of yet more Gazans. And they do that by manipulating the lines, the corridors, the escape routes all the time, 24/7. And the Palestinians are totally confused. The Gazans are totally confused about where to go and how to go. So they kill them. When they stray the least bit, they kill them. So he's in the West Bank. I haven't even talked about that, or East Jerusalem. He's got his hands full. Yes, he wants us to finish off the problem in Iran. Would he join us if we were to make a part of that finish, if you will, an air attack unprecedented thus far? Yes, probably he would. He'd put his aircraft into it. We'd have the IAF in there as well. And maybe he'd take a hiatus in Lebanon for that particular time. But we're only talking about 10 or 11 days, I would suspect, of around-the-clock bombing. So he could stand that. But I don't think he's going to back off ultimately in either place. I think he's in for a penny, in for a pound, and I think the pound's going to eat his ass.
Yeah. Larry, the enriched uranium is the other problem, it seems, between Iran and the United States. I don't know how can they solve it. I see no sign that Iran would give up on the enriched uranium, or they're going to send it to the United States, because Donald Trump is asking that they have to send the enriched uranium to the United States. The Iranian side says, no, there is no way to do that. And here is what Donald Trump said yesterday.
We get the highly enriched, we will get it. We don't need it. We don't want it. We'll probably destroy it after we get it, but we're not going to let them have it.
Yeah. How is that going to be possible? Is that going to be through negotiation? Is that going to be through talks, or he's going to get it as he did try before in the southern part of Isfahan?
Well, it's possible that Iran may try to be willing to negotiate some aspects of that, but they're not going to lose control. But I return to what I said earlier. This is not the real issue. This is the shiny object that the magician holds up, flashing it so you focus on the object while we're doing something with the other hand. The intent of the United States and Israel is to destroy the Islamic Republic and to find whatever excuse or reason they can to do so. The emphasis on the uranium and enrichment and possible nuclear weapons, this is all a, if you will, a Hollywood storyline. They figured out this is the narrative we need to sell people so that they'll buy our bullshit. Because we're afraid of a nuke, we got to stop them. When the entire premise of it is false, or it's based upon that Iran wants to build a nuke. Iran has had ample opportunity throughout its history to do so. A.Q. Khan, going back in the day, he was quite willing to help. But as you know, Nima, within Shia theology, much more so than it's something that's not common to the Wahhabis, the Salafists, the Deobandis, the extremists, is the notion that you do not kill non-combatants. You do not kill the innocent. And a nuclear weapon is exactly that. It's a weapon designed to kill the innocent, to kill the non-combatants. And that's why Iran hasn't pursued it. And in our, in the West, we profess to be a Christian society. We fail to grasp that concept because we've been such a murderous lot, quite content. We don't mind killing kids. As long as we're doing it from 30,000 feet, hey, no problem. That's when you get up close and personal and you put a bullet in their head. Yeah, that's troublesome. But as long as we can kill them at a distance, no big deal. So this is, again, I think the whole uranium thing is a distraction. I don't know. I think the Ayatollah Muqtada Khamenei would be very much entitled to say, hey, we're a sovereign country. We're a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. We have allowed IAEA inspections. We're going to do what we are going to do as a sovereign nation in the same way that the United States and Russia and China and India and Pakistan. And if you don't like it, go pound sand.
And the justification for that, Nima, has been since about the time we were using Israel to funnel Hawk missiles and TOW missiles into Iran in the Iran-Iraq war. The justification for that has been that the Iranian regime is poisonous, it's evil, it's venomous. And that's simply not a characterization of the Iranian regime, even in its worst theological configuration when the original Ayatollah was in charge of it. It never has been that.
Yeah.
And we have made that into a monstrosity. And Bibi Netanyahu, of course, has helped. And now we're caught in that. We're caught in that trap that we have created something that doesn't exist and made it the object of war. It's insane, but that's what we're doing. And I would say to you the same thing on a much lesser scale with what we're doing to Raul Castro in Cuba right now. We're gonna snatch him. We're gonna snatch him and bring him back, just like we did Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro. That's what we're going to do, and Trump's going to use that as a reflection again from the real issues in the world. Look at our power. We did this to a little island south of Florida, and it's solved the problem we've had for 50 years. What a joke!
Yeah, we grabbed a 94-year-old man.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Jeez, I mean, and the Supreme Court, bless that Supreme Court. It went along with blessing, I think, a lower court decision, but nonetheless blessed it and publicly blessed it, that people 60 years later, most of the people are dead, but their offspring are still alive, can now sue. And they can sue for their properties that they lost in the revolution, most of which were owned by Batista, Myers-Lansky, or Lucky Luciano. This is a story of sordidness of deep proportions.
Don't forget Mayor Lansky.
Yeah. The head man.
Yeah.
You know, they used to take $1 million in currency, in sacks, in an armored car or two, to Batista's hacienda every month and give it to him. That was their pay for owning his island.
Yeah.
And we blessed it all.
Larry, the problem of Donald Trump in the Middle East is that Netanyahu wants to continue the war. GCC countries are somehow feeling the pain, and they have been suffering a lot during the war and right now because they're not able to sell their oil, gas, everything they have. And so the economy is suffering. That's why one of the main reasons that Donald Trump tries to do something. I don't know if the Arab states were supporting the war, the continuation of the war. I think the story could have been different from what we're hearing right now. And that's, you see the two sides. One of them want to continue the war, and one of them wants to put an end to the war because they're not making money. Who's going to win? And how is that going to be possible for Donald Trump to find a solution to stay in the middle? I'm not talking about to the right, to the left, and not losing, because it's so important for Donald Trump, for his personality, not to lose and coming out and declare victory. Ambassador Chas Freeman today said the only solution for Donald Trump would be the Congress putting an end to the war, and Donald Trump saying, it has nothing to do with me. The Congress just forcing me.
No, actually, I think Chaz is exactly right. But it all hinges upon, I wrote a piece a couple of days back saying that, the Saudis hold the keys, and they do. At the outset, while they were publicly saying that, they sort of supported Iran privately, they were telling the United States, come in, finish them off. Let's get rid of this Islam, because they were being told, we're going to take out the Islamic Republic. There's nothing, we're going to hit them, decapitate them. They're going to collapse. People are going to rise up, and problem solved. And the Saudis bought into that, as did the Qataris and the Kuwaitis. And then what happened? It failed. Not only did it fail, but all of a sudden they found themselves in the crosshairs because they provided direct material support. They were facilitators. They were accomplices to mass murder. And they ended up paying a terrible price. Of all the five, the five nations, Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Qatar paid the heaviest price because they had the most damage to their infrastructure, and I think their ability to produce helium has been severely curtailed, if not destroyed, for a year or two. They provided roughly 44% of the world's supply of helium. They are also a big supplier of liquid natural gas. That facility, accounting for like 10% of the world's supply, that facility's been damaged. The Saudis didn't suffer as much damage. Their ability to pump oil was not eliminated. It may have been. It suffered some damage. The biggest was they couldn't export it out of the Persian Gulf. So, in the aftermath of the failure of the decapitation strikes to cause this much expected uprising and overthrow of the Iranian government, the Saudis then began to reassess, and as did Qatar and Kuwait. And It was at this point that China and Russia entered, they hadn't been out of the picture, but they became more engaged, and the diplomatic communications were increasing, and they're basically offering to set up a new, what is called security architecture that will bring in also Turkey and get Turkey, the Saudis, the Iranians, the rest of the Gulfies, all sort of responsible for their own security, no longer relying upon the United States. Because, the United States made a promise, hey, we got your back, we'll protect you. And it turned out when nut cutting time came, they couldn't do it, failed. And in fact, not only did they fail, but they left these countries exposed, and they suffered significant damage. And they're smart enough to recognize they may not like Iran, but they also realize they're in no position to fight Iran. They don't have the military strength or power. And they've now seen that the United States does not either, or that the only way the United States can continue to attack Iran is to use these countries as launching pads. And they're saying, no, I don't think so. So that dynamic that's at play right now, I think will determine how far, if this continues. I can make a case that despite Trump's bombast and his desire wants to do it, that despite pressure from Israel, the actual ability to do it is constrained because the Saudis, Kuwaitis, and Qataris will say, nope, no more. You're not using our airspace. That puts the United States in a bind. Then it's got to figure out how to just go through Iraq and ignore Iraq's protests. So, and then I can see them coming to sort of some sort of negotiated agreement. We're already seeing the traffic, is starting to pick up now. Iran hasn't affected a complete shutdown. So exports are starting to come out, which will mitigate some of the global pain. But this is very much in play right now, and it's not, the United States doesn't have control over the process.
Only thing I would add to that, Nima, is, and I know Larry didn't probably mean to eliminate Bahrain from his considerations, but boy, they've been just about destroyed.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the whole time Larry was talking there. I do think sometimes on the move. They had a choice in the GCC countries. It was different in each one of them, but nonetheless, some commonality to it. And that was, once the first round was finished, which Iran, I think, can be said to have won, they had a choice. They could fall back on what they knew, what they had been accustomed to for years, particularly Saudi Arabia, and they could push diplomatically and behind the scenes and every other way they have, threatening even possibly in terms of Riyadh, on the United States to go for it, finish them off, go for it, do what you got to do, because that's what you've been telling us you can do. And we want you to do it now. And all of them collectively become real helpmates, if you will, in that effort. They didn't. So that means that there is significant doubt, and it's growing every day in each one of those capitals as to the previous relationships that they had for so long. Mm-hmm. And I think that doubt is being erased, and it's going to be us and us alone now. Maybe Jordan, maybe Iraq by force, and that remains to be seen what the Iraqi military does about it. As Larry says, the distances are becoming forbidding. And others that are weighing in too, like Pakistan with China behind it, like Erdogan. The decisions have been made, I think, now. And so for Trump not to understand that, for Hegseth not to understand, for Kane not to understand that, for the whole American military establishment not to understand that this is a very different situation, one which they didn't calculate on, and put pressure on Trump as they can, and if they will, to get this ended and to do something like Ambassador Freeman was suggesting. Thune was the one, as I understand it, who pulled the legislation and stopped the movement to use the War Powers Resolution to put at least some constraints on Trump. And he did it because he knew he was going to lose the vote. which means some Republicans were going to vote too. Maybe Freeman's onto something. Let's get Trump out of this. Let's give him an avenue that's not quite so bad as otherwise, and get him out of this, because he, as I said, I think I'm right, he's desperate to get out of this thing.
Well, actually, you've seen that the Senate did pass a resolution, and now it's in the House, and it's Mike Johnson that's holding it up because he knows if it comes to the floor, it's going to pass, and then Trump's going to be cornered.
Oh, did the Senate pass it finally?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Thune made a decision. Yeah. Okay. Johnson is a different animal, though.
Yeah.
Johnson is motivated by Jesus, his version of Jesus. He tries to hide it. He comes out every now and then and he exposes it, like on the Mall with Rubio and the rest of them.
But the Israeli version of Jesus, not the.
Oh yes, very much so. Very much so. The what I call the dominionist sect of evangelicals version of Jesus. We will conquer all, and Jesus will be our warrior. You know, he's right there with Hegseth. He just hides it better. He's a mealy mouth guy. Hegseth is right in your face.
Yeah. I think, Larry, the point that Colonel just mentioned about Turkey, because Bloomberg reported that in March, Turkey sharply reduced its investment in the U.S. Treasury bonds from 16 billion to 1.8 billion.
Yeah.
It's a huge sort of reduction.
There was an article the other day in the Wall Street Journal about the bonds, what do they call it? The bidding session or whatever we conduct periodically.
Right.
No one wanted to buy.
Yeah, the auctions, the Treasury auctions.
Yeah, no one wanted to buy.
Well, yeah, this, I mean, when Turkey's having cash crunch, it needs to raise dollars, and the way you raise those dollars is you sell the treasuries. And that, I was, before you came on, Colonel, I was talking to Nima about the monk debate that took place on Wednesday between Mearsheimer, Stephen Walt, and on the one hand, and Victoria Nuland and Mike Pompeo on the other hand. And, you know, God, what a couple of Pompeo and Nuland, a couple of cretins.
Well, I was going to say there must have been blood on the floor after that.
Well, but here was Pompeo touting, oh, you know, the U.S. Treasury, it's so strong, and it's going, you moron, are you even watching the news? So China's been dumping treasuries, Japan is dumping treasuries, now Turkey's dumping treasuries. So people aren't. It used to be that in the face of what was considered international crisis, they would flock to get treasuries and the safety of the United States dollar. That ain't the case anymore. And in fact, increasingly, the number of countries are turning to the Chinese, to the yuan, not to the dollar. So we're witnessing a sea change, and that is that is going to be probably the biggest consequence of the United States initiating this war on Iran, is they will have accelerated the collapse of the Western financial system. And people will say, oh, you're crazy. Look, stock market's up over 50,000 today. The market is not behaving normally. That is an irrational market. Because what was exposed in the course of this war is we did not know how dependent the global economy was on 5 commodities that flow out of the Persian Gulf. And everybody assumed oil, but they didn't really focus on liquid natural gas, and they certainly didn't have a clue about urea, sulfur, and helium. At least I know I didn't, and I venture to say, 99.9% of Americans did not. But now all of a sudden, we now hear about that intellectually, but we don't yet actually see the consequences in terms of products that are no longer available on the shelves at Walmart and at Costco and at major dealers. At your car dealership, when you go in to get your oil changed, they may not be able to change your oil because they're out. So we haven't seen the full economic ramifications of this, but that is, that's where this battle's really going to impact on the world. not, in terms of, it's not just that Iran now controls the Strait of Hormuz. It goes beyond that. This is a direct challenge to the U.S. dominated, the hegemony of the petrodollar, and the fact that in the past we've relied upon other countries to buy our U.S. Treasury bills so we could go on a spending spree.
And Nima, then you think about this quote from Donald Trump. I don't think about Americans' financial situation, not even a little bit. That's a direct quote from Donald.
Yeah.
Carl, Eurasia is reshaping, or I would say shaping, its security architecture, calling she is going to go to North Korea. What would that be? It's going to be North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, and it seems Pakistan going to be part of that. I don't know about Turkey, but it seems there are some sort of attempts about the new security architecture of Eurasia, as they call it. And these countries are going to come together.
And well, the one that you just led with is a stunning development. And it's been building, but it nonetheless is a stunning development, because one of the reasons we were able to host the six-party talks in Beijing for so long and worked with the Chinese more than we worked with others, with the possible exception of the Russians. Japanese were just sort of there to listen, on the DPRK's nuclear situation, was because the Chinese were deadly opposed to DPRK having a nuclear weapon, because they envisioned the peninsula at some time in the future being reunified, and they weren't even thinking remotely about the North being the reunifier. They were thinking about Seoul, of course, and they had plans for a buffer zone that they would immediately create were it to happen precipitously. 30 to 40 kilometers, they would push Chinese forces across the Yalu and elsewhere into North Korea, and they would present that as a fait accompli, and it would extend their safety zone, if you will, because they didn't like the idea of 50 million plus Koreans beavering away the same way the South beavered away, especially with the raw materials the North would offer them, and presenting an even more pregnant threat, if you would, to China, particularly if we were still on the peninsula. All of a sudden, that's changed. And it changed with Russia, too. Russia was a part of this, too. Russia was a part of the six-party talks, but not quite as forward-leaning as China. They've totally reconciled with the DPRK. You can say it's the exigencies of reality and power, especially in Northeast Asia. And now, writ large across the globe because of our mistakes, but we're forcing all of these alliances between what are, in my view, really disparate characters, and characters that carry their own baggage vis-a-vis the superpower or peer power that's doing it with them. We force them into the same game, into the same bag, even to the point where the DPRK has now offered soldiers to all manner of other people that might have problems. This is a boon for them. They've got global recognition, if you will, that's outside the fact they're a nuclear power. And we've done all this. We are creating our own grave.
Hey, let me just add one other interesting twist with the whole North Korea angle. Iran made the threat the other day, and you can correct me, Nima, if I got this wrong, but they said basically if the United States renewed its attack, that Iran was prepared to hit Washington, D.C. and New York in retaliation. And most people said, "Oh, that's not nonsense. They don't have a missile capable of that." Guess who does? North Korea. North Korea has things I call the Hwasong missile, and it has a range of roughly 15,000 kilometers or 9,300 miles. The distance from Tehran to Washington, D.C. is 6,300 miles. In fact, what this is saying is that if North Korea provided that missile to Iran, Iran could hit any target in the continental United States, excluding Alaska and Hawaii. It could hit Los Angeles, San Francisco, anyone. And so that would be, and it's not far-fetched to say that there is that kind of cooperation, because the North Koreans have become more active in their foreign policy. They've reportedly deployed 20 to 30,000 troops now to Belarus to potentially support Russia in efforts to retake Kyiv. But I'm also sure that they are in touch with Iran as far as resisting this kind of U.S. imperialism. So that's just one other thing to file away is they could have some options.
And just to put some steel to that, as it were, we've monitored one of the last really, shall we say, sophisticated ballistic missile tests of North Korea to the height of its telemetry, and the analysis afterwards showed just what Larry said. It showed that they finally had a ballistic missile, which they've been striving for a long time, that married up with their nuclear warhead could arrive in Washington, D.C. That's from Korea, shot from Korea.
Yeah.
Larry, Vladimir Putin vows to respond to what Kiev did to this college dormitory. They attack, civilians in Russia. So he has to. There is a lot of pressure on Vladimir Putin to respond to that. And Rubio yesterday said there is no talk going on between the United States and Russia. Everything is on pause.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you see the situation? How do you see the way that Russia would respond to this sort of attacks, considering Donald Trump on one side saying that he's going to withdraw troops from Germany? On the other hand, he said just yesterday he's going to send 5,000 troops to Poland.
What a formidable force going to Poland.
That's just a speed bump. Look, this I personally don't understand why the SBU, why the Ministry of Defense in Kiev, why they're still standing. Russia should use the Urashnik and take them out, eliminate them. Maybe they'll do it now. There has, the rhetoric from the Russian side has been recently expressed by Ambassador Polyansky, and then Sergei Rybkov, the deputy foreign minister. They've been quite clear that they're going to attack Europe. They are going to retaliate for Europe, and particularly the Baltic states, allowing their territory to be used to launch drones against Russia. They are going to escalate this war. It's going to go outside the boundaries of Ukraine. It is going to involve Europe. This thing will escalate. And this attack on civilians and children in particular, it's reprehensible. There is absolutely no justification for it whatsoever. And so I don't think they're just going to do some sort of symbolic retaliation. I think it will be very significant, and it will mark an escalation in the process.
Yeah.
We are going to rue the day that we allowed Gaza to lead the world in discounting international law and war crimes. We are going to rue the day, because we're creating a world where everything goes, and everyone is picking up on the precedent, and everyone is going to augment it, I think. And we're going to wind up with a truly Hobbesian world where everyone's hurling missiles at everyone else. Lithuania, you may have seen it. Lithuania made an absolute, they said, we'll take your nuclear weapons to us.
Latvia.
Yeah.
I think it was Lithuania.
Yeah.
At least that's what I got yesterday from a source that monitors those states in particular. And Larry probably gets these emails from Mike Kruppa too. I know.
Yeah.
He's using it. The Polish situation is pregnant with problems too.
Yeah.
You got one side of Poland that has some common sense with both respect to Germany and Moscow, and then you got the other side of Poland that, send more, 5,000. Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
You're talking about Sikorsky and these people.
Yeah, it's barely a reinforced brigade. It could stand up against a Russian element for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Larry, do you think that the situation would escalate in Ukraine?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
But the one that has the ability to escalate is Russia, not Ukraine. What we're seeing from Ukraine are desperate acts. So, hey, just a reminder, I'm going to have to bail out here in about a minute.
They're proving what they are, Nima. They are truly proving what they are. The ones with Zelensky and around Zelensky, they are freaking Nazis.
Yeah.
Okay, Larry, thank you. But I'm going to continue with Carl because I have something else with Carl to do.
I don't blame you. You stay with the best anyway,
Yeah.
Right. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you later. I will see you on Monday, and hopefully the world doesn't explode in the process.
Yeah, hope so.
I'll join that prayer.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Carl, what I want to talk about is the situation with Netanyahu. He recently, yesterday, they published a video. Netanyahu claims that Israel made the United States, the U.S. civilization possible. Here is what he said.
We are fighting today the battle that the Maccabees fought. They fought for the survival of the Jewish people and the Jewish faith against an enemy that wanted to extinguish us, wipe us out from the face of the earth. We were fighting our battle, but we were also fighting the battle of civilization, because our civilization is based on the Judeo-Christian tradition. And if the Maccabees had failed, there'd be no Judaism, there would be no Judeo-Christian civilization, there would be no Maccabees. There would be no United States. There wouldn't be the civilization of freedom, the respect for our common traditions, our common values. All of that would not happen if it weren't for those 5 brave brothers. They actually made the whole difference. So that spirit animates these brave soldiers that are here today and their comrades.
Yeah.
That's a condensation of history that is frankly absurd. And it's the kind of things, I have to say, that in particular, ultra-Zionist and even those I would call Zionist period Jews propagate. It's a repudiation of the true history of the world and the human race, but it's a repudiation that's propagandistic, that's utilitarian for that race, and it is utilitarian and pregnant with dangerous possibilities for what the world really should be, because it should not be this Zionist conception of humanity. I mean, it's just in every respect possible, besides being a historical collection of lies, dangerous. That any breed, any peoples on this earth, any religion on this earth would claim that sort of I am Adam, I am Eve position and pretend it's real history is not only absurd, it's dangerous. And Netanyahu is the incarnation on earth today of that danger.
Carl, did you watch the video that Ben Gvir published about the people?
This is a man who was indicted in an Israeli court, as I understand it, and even was sentenced and went to jail, whom Netanyahu resurrected and brought out because he needed him and his people to form the coalition that would keep Netanyahu in power. Ben-Gvir is a reprehensible animal-like example. And Randy Fine is too in New York of what Netanyahu was just asserting is the master race. What's the difference between Hitler and Netanyahu in terms of what Netanyahu just said? We are the master race. You vassals out there, like you Americans, wouldn't be here if this master race wasn't here, securing everything for you. That's what he's saying. I mean, there's no difference between him and Adolf Hitler. I've said that all along. He and Hitler think alike, act alike, look alike. We've seen this before. We've seen this before. To a certain extent, we saw it in Italy with Mussolini. And we'll see it again. I'm sure that we could characterize some of the characters in the past who raped and slaughtered their way to power in the same vein. I'm not sure we'd call them the Maccabees, though.
There were some repercussions in Israel. Israeli foreign minister and other officials saying that, condemning what Ben-Gvir did, because not what he did, because of the publication of the video.
Right.
Because he published that video showing what they're doing there with the people.
Because it did damage to them. It did damage to their image in the world. Yeah, there are people in Europe I love Spain. Spain jumped right on it. But there are people in Europe talking about canceling contracts. You know.
But they don't care, Larry. In my opinion, they don't care about anybody. That's why Ben-Gvir is treating people this way.
Yeah, if you go back and you look at Netanyahu's pronouncements, I can't recall exactly when it was, but it strikes me that it was several years ago, maybe even as many as 4 or 5. One time he was pontificating like he was doing there, and he essentially said, I don't care anymore. I do not care about world opinion. I do not care about other countries' opinions, including my allies. I do not care. Israel is doing what Israel must do. Words to that effect. And that's a statement of truth, I think, with regard to his beliefs. He doesn't care. This thing we were talking about this morning, this new memorandum of understanding we're contemplating to take the place of the old one, it would be effective in 28, and it would change all of the arms sales and national security dealings with Israel and the United States. And it opens up first of all, it opens up a real vulnerability for our defense contractors, because Israel has a direct line into their technological developments and such. Like, for example, we're saying we're going to give Australia with regard to nuclear submarines. We'll never give them that. But it also hides everything with regard to arms sales, in essence, so that there's no visibility. The only visibility will be the defense committees of the Congress, who don't give a damn anyway. The responsible committees, the foreign affairs committees and such that implement the Leahy Law, for example, and other things like that, will not be there anymore. These arms sales will essentially take place in the dark, and the defense contractors will be in that dark with them, with the Israelis. This is a very insidious development, and I hope to heck the Congress grows up and gains some smarts and doesn't pass this kind of MOU. Not only that, the way the money passes back and forth has changed. It's changed in fundamental ways, if I'm listening to the briefing correctly. So these are things that Israel is under the covers trying to do right now. And that speech there by Netanyahu was part and parcel of it, because they don't want anybody supervising their arms sales and their machinations, national security-wise, with the United States. They don't want the United States Congress overlooking it. They don't want somebody like Josh Paul standing up and saying, the Leahy Law, this, that, and the other, you can't do this. They can't kill civilians indiscriminately with our weapons and not be reprimanded for it and not have the weapon sales cut off. No one would do anything about it, so Josh Paul left. He's right. And this will make it worse if we pass this new memorandum of understanding.
Yeah. The bad news for Benjamin Netanyahu is that whatever happens in the Middle East, their worst enemy, Iran, is getting stronger.
You got it. That may be that may be not just the bête noire for Netanyahu. It may be the thing that breaks his back and kills him.
Yeah. Not only that, all these Arab states, GCC countries who were supposed to have a better relationship with Israel are leaning toward Tehran and new security.
Yes.
Considering
Isn't it odd how divine providence works sometimes to change the direction of the world?
Yeah. Yeah.
To quote some of them, so, Huckabee. Oh, Huckabee, your God is failing, Huckabee. You know, the real divine providence in the world is mad, angry, and is changing the whole warp and woof of global relations.
Yeah. Carl, when it comes to Lebanon, do you think that we're going to have new round of talks between Washington and the government in Lebanon? And how is that going to help the situation with the ceasefire, not so-called ceasefire?
Yeah.
And because what's going on with considering the numbers, I've mentioned that before, Hezbollah is hitting Iron Dome batteries. They're hitting each and every. When you hit Iron Dome battery, it seems that you can hit everything in Israel. That's why there has to be some sort of a strategy on the part of Israelis, or maybe the Trump administration helping them. What would that be? The continuation of the war as time goes by? Because they're talking about southern part of Lebanon making a dead zone, a zone without anybody living there. And the same is applicable to the northern part of Israel. And how is that going to, the dynamic of these sort of two mindsets fighting each other going to play out for Benjamin Netanyahu?
I'll go back to 1982 again and say that the only way you're going to rectify that situation without making some real diplomatic concessions to Beirut, I mean real ones, not the usual ones we do, bend one arm behind their back, bend the other arm up over their head and say, you will do what we tell you to do. The only way is if we enter again the conflict in a significant way and offer forces for protecting and pursuing more formidable objectives with regard to Lebanon that nonetheless don't turn Lebanon over to Israel as the end product. The last time we tried that in 1982, we kind of got our ass handed to us too. We got 243, as I recall, Marines killed in the hotel. You may recall that. A couple of sailors in there too, I think. And we wound up, after relocating Arafat, we wound up ignominiously withdrawing ourselves, even though we had New Jersey slinging 16-inch shells into the Druids, into the mountains, and other things going on. And you had Syrian forces in Lebanon. And I heard a comment the other day that was really kind of stunning. A Lebanese said to me, it was better when we had the Syrians with us. Yeah, well, they weren't saying that then, but they're saying that now because they've looked at and identified and see in their face the real enemy. The real enemy, as the foreign minister of Oman said, the real enemy in the region is Israel. And they're seeing that right in their face now. To hell with the United States. We are in a pickle, and you've put us in this pickle to a certain extent because you're supporting that bastard who's attacking us in the South. I don't know where you go from there. Trump's got his hands full. Helping Israel to the point where you do what we did in 82 and come in and try to rescue them. And indeed, we did rescue them. We got them out. But we didn't do too well in Lebanon as we tried to linger and make the peace or keep the peace, as it were. So I don't know where we're going with this, but it's not any good place. And what is Turkey going to do? Turkey, I can't get used to saying that. Yeah, what are they going to do with all this happening just a short distance from them? I'm very surprised that Erdogan hasn't done something to this point, something that would be a lesson teacher to Bibi Netanyahu. I'm really surprised. There's got to be a lot of economic business going on behind the scenes that dissuade Erdogan from doing this. It was like Larry was saying about the bond sales and the bond purchases and Turkey needing this and needing that. Well, there are a lot of things behind the scene that you just don't know are going on that may be deterrents. But sooner or later, the geostrategic, geopolitical, call it what you will, the war situation has got to get on the Turks' mind. You know, they just released a figure on their missile too. India had just released the Agni 5, I think it's called, with the 7,000 mile maximum range and a MIRV warhead on it. And Pakistan, take note. But Pakistan's not that far away. Why do you need 7,000 kilometers?
Yeah,
oh, well, there are other people. There are other people too. Now Turkey's got a ballistic missile that it just fanfared and marched through the street. And this is a dangerous world we're allowing to develop. Very dangerous world. We're headed for testing these weapons. And Putin may be just on the verge of doing it, maybe non-nuclear, but certainly with a missile that could be nuclear to Kyiv.
Just imagine, Larry, Pakistan, Turkey, Iran, and Israel come and say, these are all our enemies. Let's take them out one by one. Are you?
Well, to a certain extent, the world is doing as it did roughly in 1913, 1914. It's lining up and choosing sides. And that tells you that if it's lining up and choosing sides, there's some forecasting going on about the future. I tried to think the other day about how a global conflict might unfold or to break out in some place like Kaliningrad or in some place like Poland, where the Ukraine conflict to get out of hand suddenly. And it's not hard to imagine it becoming a global conflict rather rapidly.
Exactly.
And it's not too hard to imagine it becoming nuclear rather rapidly. I mean, we have 9 states with nuclear weapons in the world today. And a couple of them worry me, very much worry me. One of them is Israel, of course. So we have a regime without any treaties, a regime without anything to hold us back other than the old aspect of nuclear weapons are a deterrent. But it's becoming a case where nuclear weapons may be an incentive if you're really pissed off, like I suspect Moscow is right now. And you're convinced, as I think Putin is, that eventually you're going to have to go to war with NATO anyway. So why not start it and make the first stage a resounding victory for yourself and a message to the rest of the world? I don't know. Nuclear weapons are not the deterrent they once were, though, I don't think.
They have Oreshnik. Yes. I hope that they're not going to go that far with nuclear weapons.
Well, you also fold that into the idea that some of these people who are behind the scenes want to decrease the surplus population in the world, and what better method to do it?
Yeah.
If you can control it to a certain extent and you can direct it at those countries that you want to be eliminated.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure.
Sorry to be so pessimistic. I'm becoming
European leaders not just not wanting to send their military into harm's way the way Trump has asked, so they're reneging, they're rejecting Trump on that. But Merz, the leader in Germany, is embarrassing Trump on the world stage. President Xi in the summit tells Trump to his face, "You are a declining power. We, China, are the rising power." Here, this is really quite stunning here. And now Iran itself is rapidly rebuilding its drones. The newest information here from leaked from U.S. intelligence is U.S. intelligence is expecting its complete Iran's complete drone arsenal will be rebuilt in just 6 months.
Hello and welcome to the Middle East Report, your one-stop shop for all the news coming out of the region, and I'm your host, Ali Razamanji. All eyes are still fixated on the Strait of Hormuz and indeed Iran, as President Trump says he's willing to make a deal and wants to wait a few days before further action. Still, he says the question is, do we finish the job? Well, the man in the know, as always, is Professor Pape of the University of Chicago, who joins me now. Hello to you, Professor.
Hi, good to see you again, Ali Raza.
Thanks for being with us. So there is a lot of bravado coming out of the White House. And, you know, they say they could feasibly go in again. Is that a realistic prospect?
Oh, it's certainly realistic. Now, whether that actually happens or not is a different story. I think it's obviously going to be very puzzling to people who are trying to follow this from the rhetoric of the president, because President Trump has been all over the map, and this has been true for months. So I think at the moment, actually, the more he posts, the less people listen. So I think that it's really become a little bit like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, and now all of a sudden he's done this multiple times. I think that there is a bigger picture of what's happening, Ali Raza, which, as I have said often to people, it's important to follow what's actually happening, not just simply the rhetoric around this from any leader, really. And so what's really been happening in the last few weeks is Iran is consolidating its victory. That's the bottom line here. Iran has scored a truly decisive victory against the world's leading power, the United States. This is in many ways the inverse of the 1991 Gulf War. In 1991, the United States, this was 15 years after Vietnam, emerged in that war with brand new technology the world had not seen. This is when the shock and awe campaign, this was shown live on television. The world watched as precision-guided weapons were blowing up target after target. And within approximately 40 days, Saddam Hussein's army of hundreds of thousands was kicked out of Kuwait. With the loss of just a tiny number of American deaths and about 200 casualties, American casualties overall. That was the stunning victory that defined the era of American global dominance. And what I mean by that is that coming out of that war, people thought that America could touch any place on the planet and would have escalation dominance. Well, that was now 35 years ago, and that era, it took some hits along the way, but this is the war that's the hinge war that has changed that. So what's happened in now about 82 days of war is the exact inverse of that. Iran has not just survived, it's flourishing, and it's not just flourishing in the sense of bravado. Its leaders, its diplomats are meeting with the world's strongest powers, except the United States, Russia, China. They're talking about new architectures in the Middle East and the Persian Gulf that don't include the United States. Just think about that. Then on top of that, Gulf states are reacting here, where Saudi Arabia, Kuwait have shut down the airspace over periods of time. Now, maybe not permanently, but my goodness, that's just quite a stunning reversal of any expectation. You have European leaders not just not wanting to send their military into harm's way the way Trump has asked, so they're reneging, they're rejecting Trump on that. But Merz, the leader in Germany, is embarrassing Trump on the world stage. President Xi in the summit tells Trump to his face, "You are a declining power. We, China, are the rising power." here. This is really quite stunning here. And now Iran itself is rapidly rebuilding its drones. The newest information here from leaked from U.S. intelligence is U.S. intelligence is expecting its complete Iran's complete drone arsenal will be rebuilt in just 6 months. So this whole idea that they've been set back years and years and so forth, this is just an illusion. This is always highly unlikely, by the way. So I know folks may not really, judge, but Iran's been building 55,000 drones a year. So the idea that they can't rebuild this in a relatively short time is just never was likely. So overall, Ali Raza, what you are seeing is Iran is truly beginning to emerge as the fourth center of world power. This will still take time. This is not going to happen in just a period of a few weeks or a few months. But a year and a half from now, this trajectory, there's no reason to think it's going to change at this point. And if it continues, Iran will be the fourth center of world power. They will have rebuilt their missile and drone capability to a great extent, if not exceeded that in that period of time. They will have moved numerous Gulf states on either away from America or on its side in that period of time. They will very likely in a year and a half test nuclear weapons. They may not call it a nuclear weapon. They may, states start out with nuclear weapons by calling it a peaceful nuclear test. So you have this ambiguity or this fig leaves going all the way through with other states as well. So you may, but no one will be fooled here. A year and a half, Iran has emerged here with a strategic victory of great proportions. This is a strategic disaster of historic proportions for the United States, and Iran is consolidating. They're really ignoring President Trump's back and forth banter. Will he bomb or not? They put out and they said, if that happens, here are some of the targets. So I put out on my X account what to make of that, so people can have an idea of what their missile range is, what the new targets are that they might be talking about, so we can analyze that, and I've done that on X. So you can see that this is really quite a consolidation of victory for Iran.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up some of the other players, because I was interested that when President Trump went to China, one of the big demands was that he supports, I suppose, he gets Xi to support the idea that the Strait of Hormuz much open. And Xi said as much. He says, yes, we want the Strait of Hormuz to open. That being said, Xi is in no interest to pay mind to what Trump says. And in fact, when we look at what he came back with, it was pretty empty-handed. That's just the plain reality of global power now, isn't it?
Yes, that's exactly right. So Trump went in with all these business people. They're called the tech bros, in the jargon. And there's no sign they got any deals whatsoever. Maybe tiny little bit here and there on agriculture that was already in train. Here, and then even this Boeing deal going in, there was expectations of 700 Boeing planes were supposed to be ordered by China, and they come in at 200. So these are all clear signs of these aren't just business deals, I think, from China's perspective or the world's perspective. These are reflections of American power. So what you see here is there's not even the fig leaf of an idea that there's power. And in fact, there wasn't a signed communique. There's no real joint statement coming out of this. You have Trump making statements saying, she said this, she said that. There's no backup by Xi. There's no comparable here. She's just ignoring what he's saying. He's not even taking the time to dispute it. They're moving beyond Trump. They're moving beyond the United States. These are massive humiliations for the United States because it's a massive strategic defeat.
Well, I agree. And there was a sense of it. I mean, perhaps you saw this differently. Maybe there was a sense that they were talking at each other rather than to each other, because it was an exercise in promoting your strength. And right now, America looks weaker. And what's interesting about this is that, Trump as a person feels stuck politically on this, because if he goes back in, there's no guarantee that he comes out any stronger strategically.
That's right. That's right. That's the escalation trap. You see, he is stuck now in the escalation trap. He has been since the first bombs have fallen. So what's happened is the escalation trap, as I've laid out, is you have tactical success where the military action, in this case bombs, hit target, kill leaders, but this doesn't lead to the strategic result. The regime is not weaker, it's not collapsing, it's actually more nationalist, more aggressive, more able to respond. And it is, Iran launched a horizontal escalation retaliation, not spasmodic, this is the last when movements of a dying body, but calibrated. They have calibrated their retaliation, and they've done it in ways to use some of their weaker missiles and so forth to soak up a lot of the interceptors, basically get America to waste its good ammo on bad stuff. And America just went right along. They kind of played America as a fiddle here. And America just went right along with this. And so now we're out of JASMs, we're nearly out, we're short on this. And when President Trump goes to she has all the rare earth minerals. So we have laid a supply chain for these highly boutique interceptors that require these very rare earth minerals. Well, China has 93% of these. Now, we may be scratching under every, sort of bread box to try to find every little bit we can. But the bottom line is she is highly unlikely going to say, sure, let's give you the rare earth minerals to load up the shotgun you're going to need against us versus with Taiwan. This is just not realistic. You see what I mean? So this whole approach that we have been approaching this with, just been totally, this is what happens when you fight a completely unprepared war, when you take on highly serious opponents and treat them as if they're tiny little countries like Grenada, or you're just miscalibrating at every single step. Well, the rest of the world's not miscalibrating. And now they're just simply literally, you said, talking past each other. She's focused on Taiwan. He's not focused on Iran at all. And he's not going to help bail Trump out of Iran. That was his problem. Why is she going to get his nose stuck in the middle of that?
So there is a question here, and the question really is of Trump's judgment. You said on social media that Trump is delusional.
Yeah.
And apparently there was some reporting earlier this week that even the Israelis and the Americans were considering replacing the current Iranian leadership with Ahmadinejad, the former president of the country, who's quite a hardliner. So it sometimes feels like there wasn't really a strategy going in or a real aim going in how you were going to exact any of the goals.
Yeah, the idea of Ahmadinejad turning into an American puppet or an Israeli puppet is truly delusional. There's not a surprise Ahmadinejad would be at odds with his own government. This happens to leaders all the time. It happens to leaders in the United States. I mean, you can see, Marjorie Taylor Greene in the United States is completely now at odds with President Trump, and Trump's calling her a traitor. Well, that does not mean that Marjorie Taylor Greene is about to become a puppet of Iran or a puppet of Xi or a puppet of Putin. This is just far-fetched. You see what I mean? So that's what I mean by the delusional. Basically, you see here, Ali Raza, that what happened here is the Trump, and we're still not 100% sure how this happened in this decision cycle, but Trump basically talked himself into some wild delusions about what was going to happen. And we've learned that there wasn't much of an actual process around the February 28th decision. Is common for Trump to fly by the seat of his pants, but this is exceptionally embracing quite delusional ideas. And the fact is, apparently, it wasn't just an idea. Apparently, we bombed Ahmadinejad's house in a way that we were trying to, quote, free him from his house arrest. So we didn't just kind of have a fly-by-night idea that passed by Trump's desk or his on the phone. Apparently it was strong enough that there was some action. And that's what I really mean by this being, that's why it was worth even commenting on, because the fact of the matter is, apparently we did hit whatever the guard was that was keeping him in house arrest. But this is not, this would not lead to, I don't think any way, Ahmadinejad becoming the puppet here. And if it did, I think he'd be killed in a very short period of time. I mean, this is what they've done is they put a giant X on his back. So this is not, it's likely to produce the opposite of this here. He'll just be, the IRCG or others, maybe many others, would just simply kill him.
I want to talk about midterms in a moment, but the Wall Street Journal has reported as well this morning that there was a testy phone call between Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel and President Trump, and that Netanyahu made clear he doesn't want any sort of pact with Iran, which is that would obviously be in his influence and in his objectives. But it does put the US in a difficult position, especially politically heading into, I suppose, midterms. And I suppose on an international space, the political capital's already been lost with traditional allies as a result of it.
Yes, what you're seeing is, as I've been explaining now for some time, is we're in an escalation trap. We've been through stages 1 and 2, and now we're at a fork in the road. The fork in the road is either we do stage 3, which is more escalation, it would be more bombing, and then ultimately ground operations to go get that enriched uranium. That's what we're talking about on this escalation ladder. We shouldn't forget that. That's stage 3. Or stage 4, which is we don't do that, and Iran becomes the 4th center of world power, as I've been explaining. There's no third option here where Iran becomes the benign status quo it was before war. This just not there. So this idea that all we have to do is stop, do X or Y, and Iran will suddenly open the strait, give Saudi Arabia, UAE, full passage. They'll get their economies back. I mean, they're losing 20% plus of their economies here. We need to understand and then this is just not realistic either. So we have a fork in the road. I think President Trump sees that fork in the road, and he has what's called cognitive dissonance by social psychologists, which is bouncing back and forth from these two really awful ideas, these awful futures. And he can't really settle on one, because as soon as he starts to think about one, which is, oh, I'm being embarrassed, Iran's becoming the 4th center of world power, here I'm going to start down a bombing campaign, well, then all the costs come on that side too. And so then if he says, no, I'm going to go down the bombing side, he'll flip back over. And that's what is reflected in the frustration by Netanyahu. Netanyahu clearly wants to go to stage 3. He said so. He wants the troops to go get the uranium. Apparently there's reports that in Iraq, there are Israeli commandos preparing to go in and seize some of this material on their own. Here, basically, essentially close to a suicide mission if they have to do it under fire. So you have Israelis clearly pushing for stage 3 here. But the rest of the world leaders, including in the Gulf, clearly are saying don't do stage 3. Well, what's on the other side of stage 3 is not a benign status quo. It is Iran center, 4th center of world power, future nuclear weapons, oil hegemon. This is what the choices are in front of Trump. And I think he's bouncing back and forth. And I don't think that's going to stop. So I realize everybody wants there to be an equilibrium. But notice that the price of oil is going up. The inventories in the world market are plummeting. And so as we bounce back and forth from stages 3 and 4 in the escalation trap, the world's economy is going down. And it's going down because inventories are going down. That's going to mean contraction of actual production. The epicenter of that is going to be in Asia first. India, you'll probably see that. There's already textile factories in India that are starting to contract. So you're going to see actual world contraction of growth. And I'm expecting after next week, not like weeks from now, the IMF and others are going to have to stop with their delusional ideas that this was a short war. See, all those models where the current estimates were all based on a short war, that the strait would be quickly reopened here. That's what's underneath the IMF model here. Well, that's what's used by all of the business, JP Morgans, et cetera. So that's about to change because this is not a short temporary block. It's like calling inflation temporary. So that too has been delusional. So it's not just Trump that's had delusions. You've seen a lot of people who have just had bad political judgment. And war is not just about military hardware. What I teach my students, and this is true when I teach for the U.S. military here, is war is the interaction of military action and politics. And the politics is where most of the bad assumptions occur. And that's why just promoting generals and have them run wars usually doesn't work. It's not that simple. People say, well, just hand it over no, the problem here is you need strategists. What's a strategist? A strategist has the interaction of military action and politics. That's just a rare thing. But we need to understand that's where the failures are. The failure of strategy means not understanding the political implications of military action.
So then finally, almost, the midterms are coming up. We're now less than 6 months away. How much political capital has been wasted on this war? And also, I suppose, what will the impact be? Or will there be a huge impact in terms of at the ballot box in 6 months' time?
There could well be here. So this is the interaction of what I've worried about for several years of an international crisis and domestic legitimacy crisis that's coming together. And I have a book coming out in September called Our Own Worst Enemies, America in the Age of Political Violence, where this is going to become to the fore. So we're going to come to the most dangerous elections in our lifetimes, Ali Raza, here in the United States. And the reason is because you have a situation where we already have a legitimacy shock in the United States, where the Republicans and Democrats are not just disagreeing now on policy. They've seen each other as existential enemies, and now President Trump has used force here with ICE in ways that big parts of the country think are fully illegitimate. So under those circumstances, we're heading into already a very dangerous midterm. But on top of that now, President Trump has his political support has been shrinking. And notice he's shrinking it further down. So he's getting rid of MAGA that has not been fully supportive of him. Thomas Massey, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example. These people have been essentially fired from their jobs here. Some have an X on their back. They're worried about their personal safety. So what you end up with here is a situation where you have a declining base of MAGA. Now, it's not down to zero, but it's a much harder base, a more radical base. And just today, in the last 24 hours, you see President Trump is offering nearly $2 billion to his January 6th forces who stormed the Capitol and beat up police. And this is not just about the past. This is sending the signal: if I need you, and if I need you to go and beat up police again here, I'm bailing you out in a big way. So we're heading to some really dangerous times. And as Trump's support shrinks, it's not going to collapse. That's not what's going to happen. But as it shrinks, it's becoming more radical. And that is the big change that's occurring. It's not just shrinking, it's reducing, but becoming more fierce.
Finally, then, and I suppose domestically, internationally, what do you expect to happen in the coming weeks and months now as President Trump, I guess, wavers on his dilemma that he's had for the last sort of few weeks now, at least?
Bet those weight loss meds ain't FDA approved.
Smells.
Sound to you as though it might be realistic, or is this just one of those things that floats around the internet?
Well, on the face of it, it sounds eminently.
Iran's compliance with the terms of this deal. Negotiations on outstanding issues will begin in earnest in 7 days. Iran's President Pezeshkian is leading efforts to restrain the Revolutionary Guard from overstepping on political and diplomatic policy making. The agreement is expected to be announced within the next few hours. This came out about an hour ago. Does this sound to you as though it might be realistic, or is this just one of those things that floats around the internet?
Well, on the face of it, it sounds eminently reasonable, at least for the United States, and I would argue Iran. However, you have the third party, which is always involved. And I would be surprised if Prime Minister Netanyahu would sign on for a ceasefire on all fronts, because to me, that's what it means. That means in Lebanon or anywhere else the Israelis are currently operating, also a ceasefire. So, you know, I wish we had concrete confirmation, Judge, but at this stage, we just don't know. But I hope it's true, because I think for us to go back to attacking Iran would be catastrophic, not just for our interests, but ultimately for the global economy and the global energy complex.
Do we know of credible reports of tension between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, either over this very document or the concepts articulated in the document?
Well, allegedly, it was reported to me that the Israeli ambassador told an audience that included congressmen that the telephone call that took place recently between Mr. Netanyahu and President Trump was extremely tense. And at the end of it, Mr. Netanyahu's hair was allegedly on fire, certainly metaphorically.
Right.
That's possible. You know, I've also heard that he wants to fly to Washington. And then finally, I would say that, you know, what have we seen in the past whenever President Trump expressed reservations or the potential for any sort of agreement, President Netanyahu has shown up. And ultimately, the agreement did not happen. So I would not exclude that as a possibility at this stage. The other thing is, let's assume that what you repeated is accurate and President Trump agrees to it. There's nothing in there that suggests that Mr. Netanyahu is in agreement. He could restart the war from his standpoint and then demand that we join him. And frankly, I think there's enough influence and power on the Hill to ensure that that happens.
So then the agreement, if rejected by Netanyahu, and it almost surely would be in this form, because of immediate and comprehensive ceasefire on all fronts, would have to mean Lebanon and Gaza. One would expect Netanyahu would do his best to trash it. Here's President Trump yesterday on a tarmac. I think he's in Florida. I'm not sure. There's a profound insult and then high praise of Prime Minister Netanyahu in the same breath. Watch this. Number 6, Chris.
What did you say to Prime Minister Netanyahu about Iran and how long to hold off on strikes?
He's fine. He'll do whatever I want him to do. He's very, very good man. He'll do whatever I want him to do, and he's a great guy. To me, he's a great guy. Don't forget, he was a wartime prime minister, and he's not treated right in Israel, in my opinion.
Colonel, he'll do whatever I want him to do. Now, some of your colleagues on this show have suggested the wrong person was saying that. That Netanyahu could very well have been saying of Trump, he'll do whatever I want him to do. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think you're raising the critical question of our time right now. And the critical question is, who governs the United States? And I think that's a question that should be explored, and we should try to find an answer. Now, we've had special interests in this country exert disproportionate influence and power in the past.
They just did in the 4th Congressional District of Kentucky.
Well, I think that's one example, although there are now people telling me they're uncomfortable with the numbers that were reported because they're not sure that there are that many eligible voters in the district. I have no idea. I really don't. But having said that, I think Mr. Massey did what he had to do. He conceded, and he recognized that while this is in a short-term sense clearly a victory for his opponents, this is by no means the end of the dispute, and certainly not the end of Mr. Massey. But I think we should try to answer this question, and we should start it immediately. Who is governing this country? As I said, we've had this before. When the railroads were being built across the United States after the Civil War, it was obvious who was running everything. And these were the equivalent of today's billionaires that were building the railroads and linking the various industrial centers. And these are people like Rockefeller and Vanderbilt and Carnegie and so forth. And they used to meet practically every year in Cleveland, which at that point in time was a boom town. And they would discuss who was going to be the next president. They were not there to discuss who would be candidate, because after the Civil War, the assumption was we're just going to have Republican government now as long as we want it because the Democrats started the Civil War. Well, it didn't quite work out that way, but with one or two exceptions, they pretty much got what they wanted before World War I. And the man, of course, broke that mold was Teddy Roosevelt, because he was somebody nobody wanted as president, and he was kind of a compromised candidate for vice president. But I think we need to ask that question, who's really calling the shots? Because the level of corruption now in Washington is certainly as great, if not greater, than it's ever been in our history.
Do you support Israel and the Jewish people? Now, more than ever, Israel needs committed friends around the world.
All right. The foreign ministry spokesperson for Pakistan basically says none of the specifications that have been raised in recent days regarding the various aspects of the talks can be confirmed.
Well, that's pretty important. You would think the Pakistanis would be the first to know, Judge.
Correct. So I hope we didn't jump the gun or jump the shark or whatever the phrase is and give people a false hope. But there is still that report that you got, a verbal report of the tense conversation between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And then we have this nonsense from President Trump himself, which was probably intended to either to tamp that down or to remind everybody that in his view, in that relationship, he's the dominant person. I don't think that's so, but that's obviously what he thinks.
I don't think so either. And I think that, again, we have to journey back down this horrible road to the Epstein files. We don't really know what's in those things, but we could speculate, and it's probably no good news, and it probably involves far, far too many people in Washington. And I think the people that are in the files are all hostage to the Mossad and Israeli influence and control.
Right.
That's been made pretty clear. I think John Kiriakou has made that clear. So right now, I hope it's true. I sincerely do, because it's in the interest of the United States and the interest of the world. People don't understand how much damage already has been done. It's going to take 2, 3, 4, even 5 years in many cases to recover from the damage in the Gulf. And we normally talk about the 4 F's, the feedstock, food, fertilizer, and fuel. But there's more than that. You start ranging into other areas beyond the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and then helium and aluminum and so forth. If we go in again, the Iranians have made it very clear they will strike decisively against the West Coast, and that is primarily UAE and the rest. They will wipe out whatever is there in the oil infrastructure and probably the desalination plants. And that will effectively empty the area of population.
Let's switch gears slightly. In your view, is Iran stronger militarily today than it was on February 28th when Netanyahu and Trump began their bombing?
Well, I think it is stronger militarily, yes. I know this is disappointing to many people, and a lot of people have wanted desperately to believe whatever President Trump said, but since the CIA decided to leak the truth to the New York Times, and we discovered that 90% of the capability was still intact, that contrary to popular belief, regardless of whatever thousands of targets were struck, the real capability that threatened the region and threatens us and threatens Israel at this point is largely undamaged. I think that's probably true. Now, there is a lot of information out there. Some of it's open source, some of it is not. It's suggesting that both the Russians and the Chinese have resupplied and replenished many stocks of missiles and equipment, and have added some new equipment, some new radars with much greater range that can be integrated into a much more effective air and missile defense system now. And also some new cruise missiles from the Chinese. I'm sure others have talked about this, that have a range of at least 300 kilometers, which means they can reach out 180 to 200 miles offshore. And they are absolutely designed to fly at nearly hypersonic speed or above, and ultimately sink capital ships. So I think they are stronger at this point. They're better equipped. And each time, you've got to give it to the Iranians on this point. Their engineering skills are excellent. The Israelis have always said that, and they're right. But more important, after each involvement in war with with Israel and us, first the 12-day episode, then the 3+ week episode, they have learned very, very carefully what they needed to do in the future. And they have shown up better prepared, more lethal, more capable than they were previously. Now, the good news is, I guess if we have to go back into this, is that the United States Armed Forces, largely air and naval forces, have more ammunition, more capability now than they did to begin with. And it's not enough for, say, a 3, 4, 5-day intensive bombardment. It goes beyond that. In other words, we've moved up additional loads of missiles and ammunition. Now, what does that mean to what remains in the stocks at home? I have no idea. But what I'm trying to say is that everything but the kitchen sink is floating around or waiting to be loaded onto aircraft ashore and will be hurled at Iran if we go back at this. So the damage on all sides, I expect, will be much worse this time than it was the last time.
But do the Americans understand that, does the Pentagon understand that decapitation strikes and air alone will not produce a successful achievement of their military objectives? We've been through this for weeks now.
I suspect they do, but remember, we went through this for 78 days against the Serbs in Kosovo, and we spread the campaign to Serbia proper, destroying whatever we could that we could characterize as of some military potential, like the Yugo factory and so forth. It didn't work, but at the same time, during the last 2 weeks, Strobe Talbot was sent to Moscow, and he held secret talks with Yeltsin and his group, and they agreed at the time, the Russians, that they would pull the plug on the Serbs. In other words, they would announce to the Serbs that they could no longer promise them food, sustenance, and fuel and medical support through the coming Balkan winter. Now, this was towards the end of May, beginning of June 1999. And when that became clear to Milosevic, he decided to pull out. At the time, however, the air community insisted this was all because of what they'd done. It really wasn't. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there are some people who have recognized that, and they will say that, but I don't think you're going to get that from the majority of airmen. I think their belief is that this time around, the target set will be the right target set. And this time around, we'll have more intensity and more bombing. And this time around, we will be successful. The Iranians will capitulate. I don't think so, but I think there's many saying that.
Trump still has not found an off ramp. He's still frantically looking for one. And his last resort will be brute force.
Yes. Well, I think that's inevitably the case. You escalate until you can't anymore. That it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. And then you want to do one of two things. You give up and go home, or you take a break and try to do it again. I don't think we'll get a chance to do it again. So whatever happens this time around will be the last phase. Now, a friend of mine who is more imaginative than I am said, Doug, Trump has checked into the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can't check out. And he's stuck. I think that's true. And I'm not sure that he's going to get what he wants from the Iranians, because what he's really looking for is something he can point to that demonstrates he's winning. I don't think that's going to happen. And you know as well as I do, given the sort of Roy Cohn mentality that he's adopted, if he can't twist it into a win, he's not going to be happy with it. And unfortunately, we're hostage to Donald Trump and his demands.
Here's the latest out of Trump's mouth 2 hours ago. Watch the pregnant lady next to him. Chris number 19.
We have total control of the Strait of Hormuz, as you know, with our blockade. The blockade's been 100% effective. Nobody's been able to get through. It's like a steel wall. It's our Navy. We have the greatest military anywhere in the world. We wiped out their Navy. We not wiped out their air. I think they're down to about, I would say we knocked out 85% of their missile capacity. It's very hard for them now to build missiles, to build drones. We have great drone technology, anti-drone technology now that, frankly, we didn't have even 2 months ago. We have unbelievable drone technology, both for making them and also for knocking them down. But look, we're going to either make sure they don't have a nuclear weapon, or we're going to have to do something very drastic. And the people of the country, I believe when it's put to the people of our country, they will all agree that we cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon.
That was a corpulent guy, not a pregnant lady. Sorry.
I just received this note that said, tell the judge it is someone with a large abdominal cavity.
Yes.
So I guess that's an honest mistake.
Right. But to the president, he's mouthing nonsense.
Well, of course he is. We know that yesterday, I think it was something like 26 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes.
They paid the toll.
Yes.
The Iranians escorted them. What's he talking about? I mean, I guess they failed to keep him up to date. And this blockade, he called it off. He suspended it, remember?
Yeah. Here's Chris, can you put that full screen up again? Here's what the reporter asked him that provoked that response. CNN report, Iran rebuilding military industrial base faster than expected, already producing drones, according to U.S. intel. You referenced this earlier. It's a CIA leak.
Yes. I don't know if people are failing to keep him up to date, or he simply chooses to believe as he wishes and dismisses reports that don't align with his expectation. I mean, both are possible. I don't know the answer, but at this point, if he keeps telling people over and over and over again, we destroyed their Air Force, and they had practically none, and we destroyed their Navy, which amounted to 7 frigates and a few small boats, I think they're probably going to start throwing things at him. He'll get the hook, and the gong will ring, and they'll pull him off stage.
Well, did Trump get any palpable help from President Xi last week in his wish to have the Chinese pressure the Iran government?
Oh, yes. I think he got some enormous help and assistance. President Xi welcomed him to China as the leader of a declining power, and Xi stood there and welcomed him as a rising power. And that was made abundantly clear. And the evidence that Trump got some help, I think, is clearly visible when Donald Trump talks about the realities of trying to defend Taiwan. He must have had a very useful discussion with President Xi and reached the conclusion that you'd be completely insane to go to war with China in an attempt to protect Taiwan. So right now I'm celebrating the fact that President Trump has said, look, Taiwan's 100 miles from China. We're 6,000 or 7,000 miles away. This is impossible to support. Well, hallelujah. Congratulations, President Trump. You're right. God bless you for saying that. Now, can we please line everybody up who keeps talking about war with China and shut them up? So, no, I think from that standpoint, the visit was a huge success. Now, as far as the squad or company or platoon of billionaires that went over there, I didn't see very many happy faces on the way out.
No, if you watched Elon Musk, he was a sightseer the whole time he was there. Here's somebody who was not happy with any peace negotiations in Iran or any recognition of the realism of the status of Taiwan. Sorry to ruin your afternoon, Colonel. Cut number 13.
So you're calling for strikes on the energy infrastructure, Senator?
I'm calling to hurt this regime. If you do the same old thing, you're going to get the same result. Hurt them more. Maybe they'll make a deal if you hurt them enough. But right now, I think they're trying to wait us out. I think they're playing games. And in the words of the president, I think they're crazy. I think he's right.
Finally stop listening to him?
No, unfortunately not. I don't think so. There's something else that's very important that never comes up for discussion, and I just want to touch on this point for everybody. Whenever you build military power, this doesn't matter if you're a small nation, a large nation, a medium-sized nation, whenever you build military power, I'm talking about everything short of a nuclear weapon. And no matter how much money you spend, your force can only do so much. In other words, you can't build something that can go everywhere, anytime, and suddenly defeat everyone. In other words, if you tried to send the United States Armed Forces to dislodge an enemy in control of the Antarctica, well, I think you'd have a hell of a time. We're not built to do that. And I don't think people understand that this sort of World War II style force structure with updated weaponry and some new technology really is not the right force to deal with what's going on in the Persian Gulf. It never was. Now, the British, as we discussed before, made this terrible mistake in 1915. They ended up putting over 500,000 troops into the Dardanelles, the Strait. They failed miserably in the face of 350,000 Turks. The Turks drove them away. They finally gave up and said, this is stupid, and withdrew. Now, that did not mean the end of the British Empire. It was embarrassing. It was disappointing. But they brought the wrong force for the wrong mission in the wrong place. That's what we've done. Doesn't mean that our military power is weak or incapable or we don't have good people manning it. But we need to come to terms with this reality. Most important, President Trump does. And the appropriate thing for him to say at some point, and I know he'll never do it, is that I asked the armed forces to do something that really they couldn't do. And he shouldn't have done that. But then again, I don't know what he was told, and maybe he never asked, Judge.
If the head of a country is aware that a foreign intelligence agency has blown up one of its passenger jets, and then some people affiliated with that agency are flying planes over the Capitol, and they asked them to turn the planes down to around, they didn't have permission to enter the country's airspace, and the head defense minister ordered the planes shot down.
Me and my wife opened up a new account for one of our businesses using both of our social security numbers. We are sitting there with the banker as she is typing in our information, and both of our phones.
Is that a crime, or is that protected under rules of engagement and protection of the homeland? Speaking of Raul Castro, of course.
Yeah, I really don't know. And it is disturbing that we're seeing these kinds of things come out the way we did on the alleged giant drug production and sales agency in Venezuela, when we knew that Venezuela was, a midget compared with Colombia and Ecuador and other places. I don't know, Judge. It strikes me that we're building a case, just as we built the case to take out Saddam Hussein. Nobody bothered to talk about the fact that until 1989, we had bankrolled, supported, equipped, and advised Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi military in its war with
Iran.
Iran. So
Right.
suddenly we changed horses. Nobody paid attention. You know, an awful lot depends on something in whatever we do right now. Most Americans, most of the time, are not engaged. This is something that President Trump has never understood. His ego is at stake in his mind. But the truth is that if he declared an end to the war tomorrow morning, most Americans would say, well, that's great. Next. Most are just not interested. They're not engaged. I just went down through the Carolinas on a trip, and it was perfectly obvious that the vast majority of people weren't even aware that there was anything remotely like a war going on. So I think the problem now is the same with Cuba or wherever we go. If you don't sustain heavy casualties, and I mean 500 people in a day, 1,000 people in 2 days, something like that, they're not going to pay any attention. If you keep it down to a very dull roar, you can get away with a lot for a long time. Look how long it dragged on in Vietnam. It dragged on for years, and the truth is nobody knew what they were doing. That was what came up over and over and over again. That's what Lyndon Johnson was told. That's what the generals came back and said. Nobody knows what we're doing. So I think bottom line is right now, the smartest thing he could do is to pull out of this thing. Now, when it comes to Cuba, I know there are people out there saying, oh, this is a wonderful opportunity. They have beautiful beaches, beautiful water. We just need to go in there, take off the gloves, develop this new capitalist paradise, this market-oriented economy, and we'll have casinos all over the beaches and swanky hotels and everything else. Well, we know what was there before Castro took over. And however much you may hate or detest Castro, he did everything in his power to crush the gambling, the prostitution, the drugs, and all the other illicit activities. My great fear is if this all falls apart, and I'm sure that Cuba really is in bad shape, and we go in there with all guns blazing, and by that I mean we have the president and his friends get off the plane and billionaires troop across the airfield, and we know what they're there to do, and it's not necessarily in the interest of the United States.
Well, I want to play a montage for you because you've been so critical of how people in the military get 4 stars. This is Admiral Cooper, Bradley Cooper, the commander of CENTCOM, being interrogated by Congressman Jason Crow, a former CIA officer, and then Congressman Seth Moulton, a former Marine. Chris?
You're a combatant commander. You're one of our most senior military officers with tens of thousands of service members under your command. Does the Law of War Manual state that it is prohibited to declare that no quarter be given?
It prohibits a large number of things.
No, I've asked you.
I will follow.
I just read the provision to you. I just literally read the provision to you. Does it prohibit you or anyone else from declaring that no quarter be given? I just read it to you.
We will follow everything that's in the law.
Answer the question, Admiral Cooper. You have tens of thousands of service members under your command. This is just unbelievable to me.
I find the same thing.
Familiar with General Westmoreland? I'm very familiar, Congressman. He's well known for talking about body counts. Now, when I think about you in this war, I always think about how you always got up there and would say everything's going according to plan. So let me just ask, Admiral, where was closing the strait in the plan?
I'm happy to discuss the specific operational aspects.
But did you just not anticipate that? Did you not think that Iran could do that? Or was that part of the plan here?
Congressman,
for 250 years, the Navy has kept sea lanes open and free. Under every previous president, the Strait of Hormuz has been open. So why is it closed under your watch?
Congressman, I've traveled through the Strait of Hormuz probably 100 times.
Admiral Cooper, you keep using the term significantly degraded. Last summer, we were told that Iran's nuclear weapons program was obliterated. Can you clarify the distinction between obliterated and significantly degraded?
Congressman, again, I think appropriate to talk about anything regarding the Iranian nuclear program.
No, I'm not asking you to talk about the Iran nuclear program. I'm asking you to talk about English language. What's the difference between obliterated and significantly degraded? Are they the same?
Stop celebrating free trial signups. Signups are a vanity metric. If they don't pay you, they aren't customers.
Yeah.
That's the guy in charge, Colonel.
Well, this is an old problem, and that is that the 4 stars, whether they intended or not, and that's debatable, end up becoming identified with the political figures that appointed them. Lyndon Johnson made a habit of appearing in public with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He would stand there next to Earl Wheeler and make announcements, and Earl Wheeler's job was to essentially legitimate whatever LBJ said. Kennedy started this when he appeared in public with the chairman, who was Maxwell Taylor. And they became so close that Maxwell Taylor ended up naming some of his children after the Kennedys. You know, it's a bad thing. I mean, there has to be a clear, unambiguous divide between the military and the civilian leadership. And the military has the obligation to be as truthful as possible whenever they're asked anything. And, when he was asked, was this part of the plan? He should have said, no, sir. Well, were you aware that this could have happened? Was that considered? Now, I don't know the answer or not, but I suspect it probably was, Judge. And he could have said, yes, sir, it was considered. And then he might have followed on. He said, well, did anyone plan on what ultimately happened or consider those possibilities? We did, but perhaps we didn't consider them carefully enough, in which case that's, my fault. The failure to look through this planning and to examine all of the assumptions. Nobody wants to go there. The last man who went there and did that sort of thing, frankly, in public, was George Marshall. And Marshall was not a brilliant man, and he was not a perfect man, and he would be the first to say that. But he was scrupulously honest. And I think before he died, he said, when I reflect on all the times that I was asked questions and answered them, I think I inadvertently misled once, and I may have lied once. Well, given the fact that he was chief of staff during the largest war in human history, that's a pretty damn good record. We don't think in those terms. So Cooper is probably the average officer, but he's being promoted to 4 stars and installed in CENTCOM just as Kurilla was. And if you go and look at General Kurilla was step and fetch it for Mr. Netanyahu. He was always on the doorstep, always ready to be there for Mr. Netanyahu. He was intimately involved with everything the Israelis were doing. And I think Admiral Cooper was told, you need to do the same thing. And he's done it. I think it's catastrophic. And now Kurilla has retired, and he's in a private equity firm, and he's being rewarded for his commitment and service to the war against Iran. This is what Eisenhower warned everybody about, as you know. And I'm afraid it's come full circle. So the more I look at all of this stuff, and people ask me all the time, what do you think we should do? I said, I think we're going to have to go through the senior ranks and just thank everybody for their interest in national defense and send them away and start over. And we have to change the criteria by which we judge people and evaluate them. Because remember, very few people understand this, Marshall was someone FDR did not want. And ultimately, he was very grateful that he had him. But he didn't want him because he was not a political ally. The problem for FDR at the time was, as he was told by his political advisors, all the generals are Republicans. You're not going to find any Democrats. None of them like the New Deal. So he said, all right, well, then go ahead and nominate him. And then he tried to cultivate Marshall. He called him George in a meeting, and General Marshall bristled right in front of everybody. He said, sir, I am the chief of staff of the United States Army. You cannot address me by my first name. I am General Marshall. and you are president of the United States. Well, you can imagine you could have heard a pin drop in that room, because FDR was very good at co-opting people and cultivating them and bringing them on board. Marshall would not be brought on board. So we have to find a way to get back to that sort of thing.
Wow. Colonel, what a great series of analyses, starting with this.
was wiped out. And in the next few days, fly and sent global energy markets into spiral. Meanwhile, satellite images captured this week over Tabriz in Iran, in northwestern part of the country, show something that the US military analysts will not, yes, and I repeat this, will not expect to see. And that is, Iran is reloading. So the ceasefire, as we always said, it's on life support. And in the next few days, sort of how this is going to evolve is anyone's guess. One thing is sure, is that you have two weapons. You have missiles and you have mines. One that flies at a Mach 14 and one that sits still and waits for the right moment. And those two are the most dangerous combination in the world right now. So this is what I'm going to be providing you in this live stream. I'll do my own analysis. I'll share a clip with you. But before I'll delve deeper, let me tell you something that happened with this, whatever happened. My images and everything that I had prepared was wiped out. So I am yet to figure this out later on after I finished this live stream, because I didn't want you just to be sitting and waiting. But I have no idea as to why that is. Everything that I have, usually the images that I share with you, the satellite pictures, even my books, whatever, everything was wiped out. Even the logo of the channel was wiped out. Now, I don't know how this happened. I'm not jumping to conclusions yet, but I will figure it out. I just want you to know why there is a delay. Like we always do live stream at 12:15, but this time. So anyway, let's move on with what is important, because I got a lot to cover for you. What you have right now, and sorry guys, I can't do the images for you to show. What you have right now is they have the Iranian sea mines, which is now a weapon that is continuing to baffle Washington and at the same time confronts the rest of the world for that matter. And this is, by the way, this is again the problem that it was reported in London. The US is not going to disclose much. And the Telegraph in London described as a serious strategic gap in the American military planning, which is resulting from a failure to properly assess the reality of the advanced mines planted by Iran. And all this started at the beginning of the war. So, and I'm going to share with you also as to why now you have some analysts across the pond concluding that the United States, despite having the strongest navy in the world, may be unable to open the Strait of Hormuz without relying heavily on its European allies. I am referring to NATO right here. So, and I'm going to put the link for you. I think I came across a link, except that it's in a different language. So I'll get you a link that is in English, or I can translate this and post it for you later on. So what I'm going to do in this live stream here, I'll do my analysis, and I'm going to share with you a clip, and I'll do the translation for you, because the clip from Tahrir, Qanat Tahrir, which is the Change channel. Why is it important? It's because it shows you step by step as to the images of the satellites, as to the movements of certain trucks inside Iran, and the establishment or the redeployment of the missiles, which, by the way, Iran already made it clear they're going to be targeting Israel as well. So this is why it's important. So now, as of now, the United States and Israel, they were thinking, and of course propagating lies, basically, they were thinking that they won the war. No. And because they were saying, oh, the tunnels in Tabriz, where the redeployment of these missiles launchers are, they were saying that they were collapsed. Yeah, and that the missile sites were nothing but rubble. Yeah, and the supreme leader, the late Ali Khamenei, is dead. Then you have, just as of 2 days ago, satellite images came back. And what the analysts saw stopped them cold. That is the harsh reality. Of course, Washington is minimizing this. Tel Aviv is kind of like being put on some sort of alert now, because they know Iranians won't bluff, and they're going to just fire if that comes to that. And that means what? It means that Iran isn't finished. It never was anyway. So, because while the world was watching the skies for missiles and so forth, Tehran was doing something completely far more dangerous, if I use the term, beneath the surface of the sea. Something so cheap, so simple, and so psychologically devastating that it has now baffled the most powerful navy on earth. And this is, of course, in my opinion, it's not just to have a sort of a story of how a country on the edge of defeat is holding the entire global economy hostage. Well, first of all, the country is not on the edge of defeat. Iran's still standing. No matter what they have, you believe in Western capitals. And again, I am being objective and fair in my assessments here. So the next question, as a geopolitical analyst, I will ask is, how strategically significant the deployment of these two, the missiles now, or redeployment of the missiles and the mines? So to understand the significance of these two events, you must understand where things stand as of today, May 22nd, 2026. Because if you go back to February 28th, when the US and Israel launched the strikes against Iran, aiming at regime change, which it didn't work, aiming at dismantling Iran's nuclear program, aiming at dismantling Iran's ballistic missile program as well, putting a conditional ceasefire, which was declared on April 8th, mediated by Pakistan and China behind closed doors. And now you have in mid-May Trump declaring the ceasefire on a massive live support. And we mentioned this before, so I'm not going to be repeating myself here. I just want you to have a time frame chronologically to see how the events are moving. Because here is the thing. What Iran just did, in my assessment, is the powder keg into which, your two developments must be placed. You have to put it within a context. Iran is not taking any chances. It's preparing for whatever. And the US still has these strikes on the table, of course, being pushed behind closed doors by Tel Aviv. So I'm going to share a link with you that shows the satellite image. Unfortunately, I can't show pictures because I don't have anything was wiped out. And so funny that last night, I went ahead and posted the satellite images and all that. And all of a sudden, it's gone. But anyway, life move on. You got to always stay positive, And this is what this satellite image shows. It shows that Iran opens its missile gates again. And this is not simply another round of rocket fires. No. We're talking about the strategic significance of it, that it has several layers. And I'm talking about long-range missiles of Mach 14 plus. So what the satellite images, what I was going to share with you, but I'm still going to do it next time when I do live stream and reset everything. I'll share these pictures with you because I spend a lot of time getting this information for you, so I want you to be at least aware of it. What satellite images shows of Tabriz, Tabriz is the area in the northwestern part of Iran, is that it shows in the north of Tabriz, you have the missile base in northwestern Iran. That's what it is. And it was captured before and after February 28 strike. Shows some collapse of the tunnels, the entrances, and it confirming the U.S. Israeli strikes penetrated hardened underground infrastructure. That's why the Pentagon has you believe. That's what Tel Aviv has you believe. And I'm going to show you the clip when I do the translation, and shows there were some damage to this. And I'm not denying this. It's what I'm denying is the fact that Washington and Tel Aviv are saying we crippled the missile program for Iran. That's the one I am going to push back against and challenge that one. So the fact that the current satellite images is now detecting renewed military activity in Tabriz is alarming, precisely because that base was supposed to have been destroyed, neutralized. Because it signals one of two things. Either Iran rebuilt and reconstituted faster than U.S. intelligence agencies anticipated, or the other option is that alternate tunnel systems were not fully identified and destroyed in the first wave. So either conclusion is deeply troubling for Washington and Tel Aviv, to say the least. And once again, I have satellite images through a specific link that I get to usually. Those pertain to international security and defense and so forth. So that's why. Second thing is that you have to think in terms of Iran's missile arsenal was already degraded. Even if we go with that assumption, but it still persists as of today, based on what the satellite images are showing. And that's exactly what many defense analysts, because what the analysis is showing is that the number of Iranian missiles aimed at Israel since 2026 was far lower than during the 12-day war of 2025. This is what they're saying, because everything was destroyed. But the idea is not real, because Israel and the US are saying we have degraded Iran's capacity to launch missiles. And yet, between February 28th and March 4th, it was documented. There's a record for it. Documented that 90 attempt strikes were launched against Israel. So if you talk about a degrading missile capacity, why is Iran still able to fire this much value? Which means that the Tabriz location has resumed the strikes. That's what it is. Third option is that what does the opening the missile gate again really means? Because it's a question. Here's the thing. During the ceasefire period, any resumption of organized missile salvos from Iranian territory will not be sort of a protest or a signal. That was the assumption. It will be a strategic declaration that the ceasefire is finished and Iran is returning to full wartime posture. And this is why you have now IDF on some sort of alert, because they know what's coming. Because now you have the ballistic missile storage and the launch sites are good to go. Good to go as of April 6th. And when you put, and this, by the way, was published inside Israel. by the time of Israel, which I read some of their communication, some of their articles. They're fair. Let me just put it down. Then you have the plan B Iran embarked on. And the plan B has nothing to do with missiles. Once again, I wish I had the picture to show you, because really I got a good pictures for those mines on the sea, right? You can see them. The plan B is that Iran sea mines. And that is the weapon that is now baffling the US. That's why the US is staying far behind. Because this is arguably, in my assessment, the more asymmetrically dangerous of the two developments. And there is a reason for why that is. And I'm going to share that with you as part of my own analysis here before I share the clip with you. Think about the PSYOP. As a former military, PSYOP is part of anything you do. But in this case, with Iran, the psychological multiplier effect. Because here is what even military experts are saying. They are saying that the true threat of naval mines lie not in their explosive power. No. It lies in their psychological capacity to paralyze the US Navy and global trade without a single explosion. That is the key. Because even a single mine, and once again, I find myself compelled to tell you this. When I reset everything, I kept one picture that shows an explosion of one. Not in this conflict. That was way back a few years ago. And I pulled it out of the archives and I wanted to share it with you. So, even a single mine is enough to compel operators to assume a wider threat. And think about what it's going to do to businesses, for example, for insurance. Invalidating insurance and shutting down the use of waterways completely. Even though, here is the important dynamic within all this, is that as of this morning, Iran allowed about 33 ships to cross the Strait of Hormuz after coordinating with Iranian authorities. This is the important part of it. But Iran understands this perfectly. You do not need to sink any ship for that matter. No. All you need to do is plant the fear that a mine might be there. And you're going to have to think twice about it. Second one is the scale of the global stakes. I live in Texas, as you know, and we saw now the gallon crossed over 4.30 yesterday. Then it dropped to 4.19 as of last night. I was driving, so I saw that. So the scale of this global stakes. First, you think about the LNG, liquefied natural gas. 1/5 of the world LNG supplies have been shipped through the Strait of Hormuz before the war began. So just think about the shipping traffic has been largely blocked since February 28. And that is what some analysts are calling, and I use their expression, the dual blockade. Iran blocking shipping going out, the US naval blockade preventing Iranian trade coming in. Every day this persists, by the way, it costs many countries billions of dollars. Those are lost economic activities, lost revenues, especially for the Gulf states. And for Iran, for that matter, and for the US. Everybody. The third point is why. The question is why mines on those undersea and some of them floating around, why are they confounding Washington and Tel Aviv for that matter, but mainly Washington because it's the US that has its naval assets there. Because this kind of cheap, easily deployed contact and magnetic mines in Iran's inventory can be dropped over the stern of virtually any vessels. Not just dedicated sort of mine layers and even now we are thinking about if we need to deal with this, we have to deploy a special aircraft and special devices, which I had a picture of, and Once again, when I get things done, reset, I will show you that image. And to fly all this, not only costly, but where you're going to put it. You have to get closer to the target area. Iran's not going to let you land, of course. And this is why it means that destroying Iran-designated mine-laying boats, as Trump claimed to have done, which, are you going to trust Trump? I mean, come on. Wait until the end when I share a clip with you to show you what Trump said about American people. We should demand his resignation. He doesn't represent me. And he ain't my president, by the way. No. And I don't trust any. None of those corrupted politicians. Because that's exactly what Donald Trump claimed. Oh, we are destroying all the mines. No. No. Because that doesn't solve the issue, doesn't solve the problem. If Iran were able to lay a large number of mines, this is what experts, military experts, are warning, that this could take weeks, if not months, to clear. You know, even if Strait of Hormuz is open tomorrow, do you think everything's going to get back to normal? No. You will be looking probably at the second quarter of 2027 before things get back to normal. That's how long it's going to take. So what the U.S. is saying, oh, we destroyed 16 identified Iranian mine-lining vessels. Once again, are you going to trust what the U.S. is saying? No. But at the same time, we have the NGIA, that's the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. That works coordinated those with the satellites. You have the Defense Department satellite imagery, and you have the geospatial analysis arm of the Department of Defense. Those have been specifically tasked for mine hunting duties. And you know what they're saying? They're saying that the mine threats remain very large and alive. So even the U.S. Navy is now redirecting ships to a route far away from the strait because of this. That's why Washington now is confused. Number 4 is you have the mine and missile combination as a strategic doctrine. And here is where the synthesis that makes now both deployments of missiles with whatever range, by the way, some of those missiles that now are deployed can reach Europe, by the way, which I found that, and I had the image for it, and we'll share that next time. So you have the missiles and you have the mines. Together, it's so significant, the deployment, because the missiles are complementary pressure instruments. You have to think in terms of strategic. Missiles force the adversary to look up, right? Mines force him to look down. And together, what do? You create a 360-degree threat environment in which no movement, that is the key, no movement by air or by sea is assumed to be safe. This is now Iran doctrinal use of both simultaneously is designed to. Because you want to do 2 or 3 main things. One is to deny the US and Israel freedom of maneuver in the Persian Gulf. And of course, they cannot approach Iran. 2, you have to impose some sort of economic pain on the global economy, generating diplomatic pressure on Washington to negotiate rather than resume strikes. And number 3 is to demonstrate that every military degraded Iranians retain the ability to make any victory it wants for the US and Israeli coalition enormously costly, which they won't achieve it anyway. So when you combine all this, here is what you get. What you get is that the satellite imagery from Tabriz showing this renewed now military activity. Because you have to interpret this from a geopolitical perspective and from a military aspect as an advance warning indicator. This is how you need to read that particular signal of this deployment. Iran is not passively waiting for diplomacy to resume or what have you. No. They are still talking, but they are also preparing, which what you would expect any country to do for that matter, unless you trust the US blindly. And when I say US, I'm referring to the government here. Because the US is doing the same under the ceasefire. Reconstituting whatever. Israel is doing the same under ceasefire. To regroup. So when you have the twin instruments of the ballistic missiles and sea mine, this one represents, in my opinion, represents Iran's fundamental strategic challenge for the US. Of course, they understand Iran will not match the US in air power and all that stuff. Yeah. They understand that. But it can make it very costly for the United States, meaning the war, in terms of casualties, in terms of global oil prices, in terms of shipping insurance, in terms of diplomatic blowback, which we already have here in the US. And that is why Iran is succeeding so far. Because when you consider what Iran has achieved, which, by the way, once again, and I disclosed this for you about probably 3.5 weeks ago, if you go back and look at one of the videos, I talked about this one, about how much Iran airstrikes have already damaged or destroyed at least 228 structures or pieces of equipment that belongs to the US. And those will cross the entire region, West Asia or the Middle East. Because what Iran did is targeted the hangars where we keep our planes and all that stuff. It targeted barracks where the soldiers live and so forth. Fuel depots, aircraft, key radars, and communication equipment. As a matter of fact, it is a far, and I have the link that was released by the intelligence community. It's the declassified part of it, the civilian version, if I may share with you. That was leaked to the Washington Post, and I'm going to share with you. So basically, what the far more destruction that is being caused, that the U.S. government has publicly trying to minimize. So what you need to understand is that the ceasefire didn't happen because Iran was defeated into submission, as they might have you believe. No. It's because the U.S. needed a pause. So is Israel, and so is Iran. Let me put the link for you. You can read it later on, and that's from the Washington Post. And I know for a fact that some leaks gets to the Washington Post through the intelligence community. So suffice it to say, the activity now is so visible in Tabriz. And that is what it's combined with the unresolved mine threat in the Strait of Hormuz suggests that Iran is using that pause strategically. Not to surrender, of course, but to reload. So that is the most important thing the satellite imagery is telling us. The decisive hours and the days, we shall see what's going to be happening. So, and one of the images, by the way, it was the training sea mine exploded that I found in the archives and pull it out, which goes back to the Baltic Sea. So, all right, let me share a clip with you, and I'll do the translation for you because I did it and went through it to go through accuracy of it. And again, the only reason I am doing this is because it has imagery. So you get to see. Okay, let me pause it here before I start. And let me just bear with me here, guys. And gals as well. All right. And I'm not going to play in its entirety. I'm just going to play a little bit for you. So you'll have at least an understanding with the imagery for you to see. So in preparation for the decisive hour against the US and Israel, a reality made evident by Iranian activity captured in satellite imagery, specifically in Tabriz in northwestern Iran. So let us now turn our attention to the missile bases where this activity was observed. This base is situated approximately 11.5 kilometers north or perhaps northwest of Tabriz. It stands as one of the most critical and strategically significant bases for the Iranian side. As you can observe, the site is nestled amidst a rugged, rocky terrain. This specific base has been struck at multiple points, as we can see, by Israel. Indeed, Israel has focused its effort entirely on striking this facility repeatedly. The support infrastructure, including the entrances and missile launch platforms, was struck during the 33-day war last year, as well as during the most recent conflict. You will notice that even the main entrance to this base was almost completely destroyed by Israel, as is clearly visible. However, regarding the entrances, specifically one of the primary access points to this base, which was previously struck, their status has now changed. If we look back briefly at the historical imagery, you will observe that the entrance appeared in this damaged state, rendering it unusable by the Iranian side until Israel carried out its strikes. Yet, updated satellite imagery now clearly demonstrates that Iran has successfully reopened these access points. If we examine the specific gates, you will indeed observe that there are absolutely no impediments to the movement of any vehicles or missile launch platforms in entering or exiting the mountain facility before us. Similarly, regarding the other entrance, which might not immediately appear ready for use, the presence of this vehicle, along with other moving towards the base, confirm that this access point has indeed become fully operational for the Iranian side. This is an exceptionally important base, particularly when discussing the Tabriz region. Why? For first, it poses a significant threat and exerts immense pressure on Iraq, Turkey, Syria, and the Mediterranean. And most importantly of all, it is capable of striking Israel and has indeed threatened Israel. Numerous missiles have been directed towards specifically the two bases located here in the region currently under discussion. Furthermore, they pose a significant threat to Baku and Azerbaijan. More importantly, however, they also threaten Ukraine and Europe. Indeed, statistics regarding Iranian missiles capabilities and ranges dating back to 2020 demonstrates that if these missiles were launched from central Iran, they will be capable of covering a distance of approximately 2,000 kilometers. These earlier statistics established that Iran possesses the capability to even threaten Europe, specifically covering Ukraine and several Eastern European nations should launches originate from central Iran. However, if launched from Tabriz, these missiles achieve even greater range. In fact, observing the Iranian side attack on the Diego Garcia base revealed that Iran possesses missiles capable of covering a distance of over 4,000 kilometers, demonstrating that Iran is capable of striking the entirety of Europe, as illustrated here. This is precisely what renders the issue of reactivating the Tabriz base in particular a matter of grave concern for the region and for Israel in general. If this indicates anything, it suggests that Iran is attempting to regain control over or access to these bases, which have been rendered black, that means deactivated, as of a result of being neutralized by Israel and the United States. Note that the majority of the bases were observed, specifically those now marked in black, are situated in western and northwestern Iran. Israel focused its effort on neutralizing the threat emanating from these missile bases in these specific regions, effectively compelling Iran to launch its missiles from central Iran, a situation that persisted until the current truce came into effect. Now, however, Iran seeks to reactivate this capacity in order to exert pressure on Israel, and not merely on the Arab Gulf states and the United States. This is driven by critically important reason. The United States has altered its tactics, having fully recognized that Iran, it possesses the capacity to strike U.S. bases located in the Arabian Gulf, or Persian Gulf rather, specifically targeting refueling aircraft. For instance, at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, an AWACS aircraft and several refueling tankers sustained damage. Consequently, the majority of these refueling aircraft have now been relocated to Israel, specifically to Ben Gurion Airport and other bases. As a result, should the U.S. president issue the order to strike Iran once again, the bulk of this aircraft will launch from these locations as well as from the Mediterranean, specifically from various Greek islands and from Europe. They will be positioned to conduct mid-air refueling operations for fighter jets, carrying out the required strikes. Consequently, the Iranian strategy centers on achieving tactical surprise, laying in wait for this aircraft to return to their bases, at which point they will be struck by Iran's missile batteries. It is evident that this constitutes the primary tactic for the Iranian side, aimed at neutralizing the offensive capabilities of both Israel and the United States against Iran. This is particularly significant given a recent Western report confirming that Iran, with Russia's assistance, has thoroughly analyzed U.S. flight patterns over Iranian airspace. This analysis has facilitated their ability to execute stealth operations, maneuver effectively, and even strike U.S. combat aircraft, as evidenced by the incidents involving the F-15 fighter jets. A recent video clip further illustrates this point regarding U.S. refueling aircraft, showing the KC-135 and the KC-46 tankers, key assets for U.S. aerial refueling operations, present at Ben Gurion Airport. Furthermore, satellite imagery confirms that these aircraft were currently dispersed across these three specific locations. Their presence is well known, fully documented, and by no means is secret. Consequently, Iran views bases such as Tabriz Air Base specifically as capable of posing a significant threat. From there, they could potentially strike northern Israel and target the Israeli military buildups currently supporting operations against Hezbollah. Furthermore, additional refueling tankers have been observed escorting fighter jets into the Middle East or West Asia, apparently bound for Israel or one of the United States regional allies, dropping them off before the tanker themselves return. Here we observe the flight path of yet another aircraft, one that was previously spotted flying over French airspace, as is visible here. Yes, side note, French is allowing its airspace to be used for that. Sources have explicitly confirmed that these aircraft are F-16 fighter jets, which have now arrived in the region, according to these same sources. Indeed, audio recording released by these sources indicate that at least 5 or possible 6 F-16s have reached the current location, the region. Such deployment typically constitute defensive measures. However, preparing defensively in the context of clearly implies that the United States is in fact preparing to launch an offensive strike against Iran. The movement of strategic bombers also remain ongoing. For instance, in the early hours of this morning, the refueling tanker was observed flying over Lages Field in Portugal, specifically on Tarceja Island, conducting refueling operations. Subsequently, audio recording revealed that a B-52 strategic bomber was involved in this refueling sequence. Consequently, all these maneuvers serve as a vital role in the broader process of operational readiness and positioning for a direct flight towards Iranian assets to launch strikes against targets located within the region. Furthermore, U.S. Central Command today released a clear image of a B-1B Lancer strategic bomber, confirming that it's present in the region, specifically over the Mediterranean Sea. Consequently, the United States, including U.S. Central Command and the U.S. military, is indeed making full preparation to strike Iran once again on the military front. I'm going to stop right there because, and by the way, just to let you know, I did listen to the recording of the pilots communicating, and it was on the video there. I just have to go back to get that one. But just to let you know, I did listen to that recording the anchor was talking about. So here is my conclusion for you, because I came to the end here. It's different without images, without nothing. So, but it's okay. So, what Iran has shown, in my assessment, is it demonstrated and showed the world that you don't need to win a war outright to make winning it sort of impossibly expensive. No, all you need to do, you get a $1,500 mine, and a rebuilt missile tunnel in Tabriz may ultimately cost the global economy more than the war itself. Because the ceasefire as of today is fragile anyway. The Strait of Hormuz is tip wire. And the satellite image tells us Iran is far from finished. That is the harsh reality. Because what happens in the Strait of Hormuz does not stay in the strait, by the way. It shows up in your gas prices, in your grocery bills, and the stability of the entire world order. I don't care what part of the world you live in. You are impacted by this one way or another. It's because now Donald Trump found himself stuck doing a war for someone else. That's the price you pay. So here is the question I want to leave you with, and I will greatly appreciate if you would like to leave a comment in the comment section. I want to share this question with you before I play some clips for you. And the question that I thought about, because my purpose for it is just to exchange ideas, no more, no less, because you are part of this community. So I like to, and I care about learning about your opinion. Your opinion matters to me. What I want you to think of this is this way. Do you believe the United States and Israel have a clear endgame strategy for Iran? Or are they just reacting to events one step at a time while Iran plays the longer game with mines, missiles, and time itself? Let me repeat this quickly here. Do you believe, in your opinion, do you believe the United States and Israel have a clear endgame strategy for Iran? Or are they just reacting to events one step at a time while Iran plays the longer game with mines, missiles, and time itself? I would greatly appreciate your feedback on this one. Before I play clips, I want just to add something to this. And I remember I argued in one of my writings about 8 or 10 years ago, or even 12 years ago, way back. And I argued that American foreign policy is just reactionary. That means we react to event. We don't structure some substantive strategy that will lead us see the long vision, because we never had that. As a matter of fact, the U.S. ceased to have a foreign policy for the last 38 years, in my opinion. And I go back in history and found out, no, if you look at all the events, we've just been reacting to them. Beside reacting, we create conflict. So the two goes parallel. So that is why I found that, thought of that question for you to be of importance. So before I share the first clip, I want to let you know that Carl Za will be here tomorrow at about 1900 hours or 1930. I got to confirm the time with him, Central Standard Time, for our conversation. I look forward. I haven't talked to Carl for a long time. I was overseas and he was traveling too and so forth. So, but anyway, tomorrow, Carl will be here and hopefully I won't have any issue with the StreamYard. So I look forward to that. All right, let me share with you the first clip. And the first clip I want to share with you is about, you remember yesterday, the day before, I showed you a clip about Thomas Massey. He's the congressman from Kentucky who lost the elections, but it's a win for him in the long term. And I found it very interesting because what he's saying is the truth. And I know a lot of people here in the US do not like to hear the truth. So I wanted to share this with you because I want you to take a listen. And it's in English here. Take a listen, please.
Why are we going to war with Iran? I think the most candid answer came from the Secretary of State, who told the press that Israel forced our hand and dragged us into this war. Again, and American families in my district want to know how this is going to help them pay for groceries. How does this make them any safer in their schools or in their neighborhoods? How does this help them pay for housing? Have we learned nothing from the laundry list of wars and regime change experiments we sparked across the Middle East that have racked up a total of at least $8 trillion of debt in Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan? A sustained war with Iran will not stabilize the region. It's already ignited the region. It will radicalize new generations of terrorists, and it will send more swarms of refugees into Europe and the United States. Iran is not Venezuela. The Ayatollah was not a president. He was a religious leader, and the United States and Israel turned him into a martyr. And in the process of doing so, we've already expended billions of dollars, and more solemnly, 6 American families must now lay to rest their sons and daughters. And for what?
Very, very spot on. And as a matter of fact, I found another one that is important. And the reason I want to share this with you, especially for my American viewers, because here in mainstream media is not going to allow this kind of information to be shared.
أمريكي جمهوري قرر أن يقول لا لإسرائيل فتحالف ضده ترامب.
Okay, sorry, I got the wrong one. This is the guy who won the elections, and basically the one that was supported by AIPAC and Donald Trump. So I just wanted to show you that even here in the US, they won't even want to sort of demonstrate or share that one with the American people. And the last one I want to share with you, which to me is disturbing, this is from a former special ops, and I'm aware of him. I didn't serve with him, by the way. It's just I'm aware of him. I know who he is. So let me just share with you what he has to say. I think I was a ranger. Take a listen, please.
Our U.S. president on camera says, and I don't think no more than 7 days later, our U.S. president on camera says, and I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. Excuse me? People are starving in this country. Gas just through the roof. You don't give thought to the American financial situation one bit.
When you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, the way Trump has been, he has no idea what it's like to fill up a gas tank, or what it's like to go out to the grocery store and spend $360, 2 days worth of food or whatever it may be. When you come from that lineage, that bloodline, of course you don't care. We call him a businessman, but I mean, a businessman to me wouldn't be somebody with as much bankruptcies, not even bankruptcies, failed businesses, from casinos to steaks. This dude has failed it all. I wouldn't necessarily elect him, but I think America needs to get back to its roots of like-minded individuals who grew up the way the average American grows up. We stepped away from that.
It's spot on. But that's where the problem is. The problem is also American voters. They are so ignorant. And I'm not generalizing here. I'm just stating the facts. It's because we are poor readers. We don't want to read because you exercise your brain and reading is too hard. I used to see it in college when I was teaching. That's part of the problem. So when people go vote, they have no idea. They're not willing to educate themselves about the candidates per se. But also, not just the voters, the system in itself is corrupted. Straightforward, it's kind of a reality. I'm not saying something you don't know, especially for my American viewers. You already know that because you can see where things are. So I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to Fatima Santiago for buying me many, many cups of teas in support of my upcoming Asia trip. I am so grateful to Fatima for that. Thank you so much, Fatima. I also want to give a thanks to American Citizen X, who bought me cups of teas, in support
president
plotted a coup in Tehran involving the former hardline president of Iran, Ahmadinejad. But before we get there, I want to ask you, can Donald Trump sue himself? I mean, to me, this agreement that Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general, who should never, ever be the attorney general of the United States, is unconstitutional, unethical, and unenforceable.
Trump just has his hand in the kitty on everything. We have lost any semblance of the rule of law. It stinks so badly that even Republican senators are scandalized, and that goes a long way. Our political system has been corrupt for decades, but Donald Trump is without any constraint at all. He is enriching himself and his family, using government resources for benefit, but narrow partisan benefit. And it's the likes of which we've never seen in our country.
And the instrument for much of this is a very fine trial lawyer who has totally corrupted himself in an effort to induce the president to name him attorney general. But after his performance behind closed doors, so we only know what happened by a few senators that have leaked it, after his performance before the Republican Senate caucus 2 days ago, it would be hard for me to believe that he could be confirmed as attorney general. This guy will do anything the president asks, from indicting the former director of the FBI on a matter of free speech to indicting the former president of Cuba on a matter of government security. So let me ask you this. If a foreign or what you believe is a terrorist organized airplane is illegally over your airspace and you ask the plane to turn around twice and it doesn't turn around, of course you can shoot it down. Remember when the balloons were flying over the United States, we were going crazy, and then the Biden administration finally shot them down. They turned out to be nothing, but we had the right to do so. I'm not in favor of killing people, but doesn't the government have the right to do what Raul Castro is accused of having done?
What the Cuban government did was in defense, national defense. What Trump does is murder. He just kills people in boats in open waters without the slightest claim, the thinnest veneer of national security. So Trump's just an outright murderer. Cuba was acting in self-defense. We were horrified, rightly, that someone made an assassination attempt on U.S. government officials. It happened a short time after the United States deliberately assassinated the leadership of Iran. This is a strange situation. We are using words of law by gangsters in our side who commit far worse abuses than anything we're claiming of other countries. It's absolutely
when President Trump
out of control.
When President Trump in his first term dispatched CIA drones to kill General Soleimani, that was actually an act of murder. Soleimani was on a peace mission. He was in a country that was an ally of ours, Iraq. He was a general of a country with which we were not at war at the time, Iran. There was no lawful basis to assassinate him. Is somebody going to indict Trump for murder?
Well, this is what is happening. Our presidents are, in general, murderers. They order the assassinations or the killings of people that do not have any protection. There's no judicial claim or anything else. Trump does that regularly right now.
But I would say that this kind of extrajudicial killing is part and parcel of American statecraft, at least in the 21st century, from George Bush Jr. to Obama, to Trump 1, to Biden, to Trump 2. But what's happened is it's become completely normalized, so that it's just normal that the president orders murder from the White House and the murder of the leaders of other countries, or the kidnapping of other countries' leaders, or now the indictment, which is a prelude to another U.S. regime change operation, which is underway in Cuba. So we have a gangster government. We have most leaders in the world afraid, because if they say something, the gangsters will go after them. So we have a lawlessness right now, which we've never seen before.
And what are they going to do?
It doesn't work. It doesn't.
So President Trump is going to send a bunch of beefy soldiers to kidnap a 95-year-old man in Havana?
We're within, I don't know, hours or days of another regime change operation. And again, it's blatantly, fundamentally illegal by any international standards, illegal by United States actions, but commonplace. If I could, I wanted to read everybody the reason why the UN was set up, knowing that we'd be talking about this topic. In the core purposes of the United Nations, it says all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. This was we don't want another world war, and we don't want nuclear annihilation. So all member states, that includes the United States, actually, which really, once upon a time, set up the United Nations, shall refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. We're using it right now. We're about to overthrow Cuba. We've kidnapped and basically, in a conspiracy, taken over indirectly the government of Venezuela. We tried in a completely harebrained scheme of Trump and Netanyahu to do the same in Iran. Same plot, same idea. It's led to a worldwide disaster, as these madcap operations do. They're not just ludicrous, they're tragic in their outcomes. And the whole point of the United Nations was, stop doing this, for God's sake. But Trump is completely himself without any idea of law or restraint. He's told us that. He said the only restraint is his own decisions. That's all that counts. He's told us that. When he said that, we didn't say, oh, this man is not fit to be president of the United States, because that's a violation of his oath of office, a fundamental violation. Nobody said it. Where was the Speaker of the House? Where was the majority leader of the US Senate? These institutions have become meaningless because these people do not understand or honor their oath of office. The gangsterism of Trump is clear, but what's amazing is how the people in his party, because they're so scared of him, because they put themselves above the country and above the Constitution, don't do anything about it. It's true. You do something, well, with this thug, until he's really brought to law, you may pay a price, like Massey did last week, the congressman who stood up and told the truth about Epstein and about many other things of Trump. You might pay the personal price, but our country's at stake, for God's sake. This is really the point.
All right, I do want to get to this bizarre alleged plot involving former President Ahmadinejad. But before we do, I not to animate you, but to induce your response, I have to run a clip of President Trump 2 days ago on a tarmac, in which he says of Prime Minister Netanyahu, he says this twice, he'll do whatever I want him to do. And I'm wondering if it's really the other way around. But you tell me after you watch this. It's pretty brief and very direct. Chris, cut number 6.
What did you say to Prime Minister Netanyahu about Iran and how long to hold off on strike?
He's fine. He'll do whatever I want him to do. He's very, very good man. He'll do whatever I want him to do. And he's a great guy. To me, he's a great guy. Don't forget, he was a wartime prime minister. And he's not treated right in Israel, in my opinion.
Do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? You may qualify for the IRS Fresh Start program.
Aside that he's a great guy, but will Netanyahu do everything Trump wants him to do, or is it the other way around? Will Trump do everything Netanyahu wants him to do?
Well, I think Trump is right. If Trump said to stop doing this, Netanyahu would have to stop doing it. The point that Trump is really making is that every illegal action, every illegal war, every completely bizarre scheme, Trump has signed off on. He's not a puppet of Netanyahu. He's just an idiot. Sorry.
What is your take on this New York Times piece alleging effectively that former President Ahmadinejad was co-opted by the Israelis and ready to be installed in place of President Pezeshkian, whom you and I have met and interacted with?
Well, I think that the point of the story is correct, and I was waiting to hear details like this. The point is the following, and again, I would like people to understand, if they don't know the history, U.S. foreign policy, going back to the creation of the CIA in 1947, is based on regime change. That means that the United States arrogates to itself the claimed right to decide who governs in other countries. And if the United States doesn't like who's governing because maybe they won't give an oil concession, or they won't allow a military base, or they won't pay a payback, or they won't give a bribe, or they won't let their territory be used for an insurgency against a neighboring country, then the CIA, which is a private army of the United States, arrogates to itself the right to bring down that government. What we're watching is this behavior. It's happened probably 100 times since 1947. Lindsay O'Rourke, the superb political scientist at Boston College, wrote a book about this about 8 years ago called Covert Regime Change. She was a PhD student of John Mearsheimer. She documented 64 regime change operations, mostly CIA, between 1947 and 1989. She pointed out that they're disasters. They lead to civil war. They lead to insurrection. They lead to continued unrest. They lead to boomerang effects on the United States. They don't work. But the CIA is a kind of madcap, completely unaccountable agency. A few presidents try to keep it a bit under control. President Kennedy tried the hardest, and he probably lost his life because of that effort. Trump just encourages it. So with Venezuela, we knew the story as it's told, that the valiant U.S. military went in and captured the president by surprise, wasn't true. The stories that have now come out are that this was a regime change in Venezuela with a conspiracy between the CIA on the one side and elements that are now in power in Venezuela on the other side, who conspired to remove the president and then get a promotion themselves. And money, no doubt, changed hands as well. The Iranian operation was the same. They told us in the first day there will be a new regime. It will be pliant to the United States. That operation failed. Then it was surmised that what the U.S. and Israel had supposedly meant was that they would kill a lot of people, including the religious leader and leaders of the government, and then there would be a public insurrection, and then the regime would change. That story never seemed right to me. I was waiting for the inside job, who they were going to put in place, how this coup was actually going to work. And I credit the New York Times with doing a good job of telling us what the real story was. Yes, Trump said, I'll pick the next government. He said it. He told us. This is not subtle. People need to listen. But then, now we know what they had in mind, which was that they were going to take a former president who was under house arrest and against the current government, and they were going to put him in place. And then they had to spring him from his house arrest. So they had to kill the guards around him. But it turns out, apparently, that they injured this guy as well. And so the plot failed right away. In the meantime, the whole world economy is reeling. Oil prices are $110 a barrel. Gasoline in the United States is $4.50 a gallon. The Straits of Hormuz are closed. Thousands have been killed. Tens of billions of dollars have gone because of this craziness. Now, when is that going to be made public and held accountable? Obvious answer, never. Never. There's no accountability. Gangsters aren't accountable. This kind of undeclared war, as your show leads in rightly every episode, this has become commonplace, just as it says. Nobody looks at this. The last time that one looked at the horrors under the covers of the CIA was 1975. It was called the Church Committee. Frank Church of Idaho, a brave man, looked and found out that it was far worse than anyone thought. That was 51 years ago. We've never had another look. So, yes, this madcap, crazy idea. And Trump is right. Netanyahu didn't tell him to do it. Netanyahu wanted to do it. Trump's an idiot enough to do it. The other presidents before him knew that this was crazy, but not Trump, because he doesn't understand. And so this is where we are. And the New York Times did a good job telling us in two good stories. One about the meeting with Netanyahu, the head of Mossad, and Trump, where they were the only three in the room that thought that this whole idea wasn't crazy. And then the second story that exposed just how completely crazy this whole thing is. But the mindset needs to be understood. The mindset is the United States shouldn't leave well enough alone. The United States shouldn't abide by any international law. The United States shouldn't abide by the UN Charter that it created. The United States should change governments when and where it wants. In Mexico, in Greenland, in Canada, in Venezuela, in Cuba, in Iran, you name it. That's our foreign policy, so-called. It's true. You look at Rubio, you know it can't be based on diplomacy, that's for sure.
Well,
this is where we are.
What has become of Ahmadinejad? Has he been arrested and executed? I mean, this is treason.
Well, probably they're not too humored by what happened. That I'm sure. We don't know, and we have no more information than I have no more information than what was given in that story. But the point is, what we're doing is nothing like what is discussed on the surface. It has nothing to do with the Constitution. It has nothing to do with international law. It has nothing to do with national law. Trump is enriching himself. He's enriching his friends. He has taken over the machinery of government, and our Speaker of the House and our Majority Leader are co-conspirators because they are silent even though they are a co-equal branch of government with a constitutional responsibility to stop this complete lawlessness. Of course, the Justice Department, once upon a time, the idea was that it was actually about justice. Now it's about Trump's complete use of the words of law to go after his enemies or his supposed enemies and to enrich himself and his friends.
Chris, I have one or two more questions for Professor Sachs, but I want you to change the title of this episode to Professor Sachs on Fire.
I wanted the word cuppa, as in cup of tea, I thought would be great to mix with hug. When I saw the...
Is the Strait of Hormuz open or closed? Are negotiations still going on? Or when Trump says, this is going to aggravate you because I think I know the answer, oh, we're getting close, is he just manipulating the market again?
Yes, he is. We're not getting close by any sign whatsoever that we can see. We're in a situation that has been understandable from the second day. Once this madcap plot to put Ahmadinejad in power failed within the first minutes, the United States was trapped. The United States was trapped because the whole idea was not only illegal, reckless, but it was doomed to fail if this crazy plot wasn't successfully realized, which it was not, and it failed. So from the second day onward, Iran had retaliatory capacity and deterrent effect then. The United States could take military action against Iran, no doubt, but the result would be the destruction of the Middle East. The result would be the destruction of the world economy. So Trump threatens and blusters, but if he acts, we have what is now a very serious economic crisis. We have the calamity of the century. And probably someone has explained that maybe in slow, simple language to Mr. Trump, that you can't do it, that there is no option. They fired a lot of generals that apparently told Hegseth and Trump that, but the others that came in have been clear. So no, there's no military solution. Trump blusters, he threatens, but he can't do anything other than blow up the Middle East. So the Iranians say, we want our assets that you stole, the United States, which is true. We want them back. We want sanctions that were supposed to have been lifted 11 years ago when the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was signed, lifted. And the United States on the other side says, we're not doing any of that. You just hand over all your enriched uranium and you give up and surrender. And then Trump says we're close to a solution. Doubtful. Of course, I don't think there can be a negotiated solution, but I think that the obvious implication of that is simple. The United States should go home. Stop this craziness. The episode failed. Go home. It's over. It failed. Trump can declare it the greatest success in the history of the world. Who cares what he says? Go home. Stop this. Then the strait will open under Iranian control, but it will open because Iran has multiple reasons to open the strait once the U.S. is gone. That's the point.
Right.
So the resolution of this crisis is not hard, but it does not wait or have to wait for some negotiation on issues where the United States has zero credibility because it has bombed and killed the negotiators twice and ripped up an agreement 10 years ago that would have made all of this completely moot. And if the United States has no credibility, Mr. Netanyahu is an indicted war criminal, and his colleagues have recently been indicted as well by the International Criminal Court, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. That's just a completely lawless government. Trump is right. Let's take him at his word. He can tell Netanyahu what to do. So if Israel continues in this way, that's at Trump's bidding. Absolutely true. So we can solve this crisis today. Trump announces victory and goes home. That's all. That's all it would take.
Professor Sachs, thank you for being at one of your most eloquent times with us.
Coffee. Follow me.